At a campsite on a sunny day, a man appears to be in shock, with two corpses lying beneath him. The young man starts screaming, "Yellow dust in the yellow dust." Suddenly, a black silhouette appears in front of him, and this figure seems to be holding a sword in its hand. A well-worn sword, covered in blood, with two bells hanging from its tip. The young man falls into despair and starts crying for help. As a dark shadow emerges from the bushes, he is grabbed by the leg by a black tentacle and dragged into the bush, leaving behind the marks of his fingernails. After some time, someone finds his lifeless body. A group of girls questions when he entered a restricted area. They start complaining because now they'll have to report the incident due to this victim. The black-haired girl notices something. The others in the group also become alert. The black-haired girl takes something from inside her jacket, which appears to be a blade wrapped in a bandage. She grabs the blade and makes a cut on her own hand. Apparently, it was intentional. She wanted to bleed herself. Several veins begin to appear on her arm. Officer Kang then becomes very serious. The girl with glasses calls out to Officer Kang and points at a dark figure. The black silhouette starts moving, emerging from the bushes. Kang then says to leave it to her. As she walks toward the creature, it's possible to see that her hand and sword take on a sinister form. On her back, there is a logo that reads, Ministry of Environment, Yellow Dust Special Forces. The scene shifts to a large building. In the city of Seoul, right next door, there is a job interview room for a level 9 public servant position. The participants are being called, and number 12 is up next. Meanwhile, in the bathroom, someone is agonizing with anxiety. The young man inside the bathroom apparently doesn't want to participate, because all he wants is to go home. He thinks he won't be able to go through with this. He tries to wash his face and calm himself, then spends some time staring at himself in the mirror, while the water keeps running wastefully. The young man is deeply pessimistic. Then he decides to take a bunch of pills. He pauses for a moment and starts looking to the side. A small bird appears outside the window. The bird starts staring at him, and he stares back at the bird. The two enter a very strange standoff, but suddenly, the bird speaks to him, asking, "What the hell are you looking at, wimp?" The young man is bewildered by this, thinking it's just a hallucination caused by an overdose of medication. On the news, the anchor reports the disappearance of 4 people who were camping on Gyeonggan Island. The young man watches the news, trembling with anxiety. And here we are introduced to our protagonist. His name is Han Maru, 29 years old. He is just an ordinary guy struggling to get by in South Korea. Han Maru has been preparing for the level 9 public servant exam for 5 years, but unfortunately, he has failed 4 times. He celebrates finally making it to the interview when a woman calls his name. Applicant 35, Han Maru. He shouts from the back that he's there, and the woman tells him to get ready because he's next. Suddenly, he feels confident and says he'll pass no matter what. Our protagonist walks toward the interview room. It's showtime. Inside the room, there is a man with the aura of a mafia boss. Han Maru appears very nervous, sweating profusely. The man asks why he applied to be a public servant. Han Maru replies that he wants to contribute to the community as a public servant. But deep inside, all he really wants is an easy job, stability, and a quiet, secure life. The man asks another question. What would you do if a superior asked you to do something unethical? Han Maru stammers and says he would discuss the issue and try to find a solution. But in reality, he would just try to avoid the situation. The man asks about his interpersonal relationships. Han Maru admits that his communication skills are terrible and that he avoids interacting with people at all costs. Though that certainly wasn't what he wanted to say. The man is surprised by the strange response, and Han Maru panics, realizing he has completely messed up. Finally, the last question is about to be asked. The man asks what the most challenging moment in Han Maru's life was and how he overcame it. Extremely nervous, Han Maru stumbles over his words and says he has never faced a difficult moment in his life, which obviously doesn't seem true. The man decides to test his problem-solving skills. Han Maru tries to calm himself and continue speaking. He then shares a bit about his past, mentioning a time when he went to the mountains with his father as a child. Suddenly, Han Maru becomes paralyzed as he recalls a sinister black silhouette. At that moment, a chill runs down his spine due to the bizarre memory. The thing in his memory had multiple eyes and was terrifying. Amidst the terror, he remembers the figure of a little boy standing there. He freezes at the sight of it. The memory horrifies him so much that he loses consciousness. The weight of his body shifts backward, and all that is heard is the sound of the chair falling. His vision begins to blur as he tries to make out something. Finally, our protagonist manages to see the ceiling, and the man tries to revive him. As he remains on the floor, the man keeps insisting on reviving him. Suddenly, Han Maru feels nauseous and looks like he is about to vomit, which he does in a disgustingly vivid scene. All that is heard is the sound of vomiting. The scene shifts to a housing complex. Han Maru is lying down, frustrated for messing everything up. He laments ruining everything, believing he will never get a job, a girlfriend, or friends. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door at that moment. When he opens it and peeks outside, at that moment, he sees a gigantic woman standing before him. The towering woman is furious and asks why he didn't answer his phone. That massive woman was his mother, and he wonders why she isn't at work. His mother explains that she came by to bring him some snack. He gets excited, hoping there's some meat, but unfortunately, there's nothing with meat inside. Despite this, he thanks her. After all, the food was given with kindness. The towering mother starts looking around and notices the trash scattered throughout the apartment. Hanmaru is there, happy to have food, but his mother is bothered by the mess and starts nagging. He asks her to leave the mess alone since he plans to clean it later, but she wants to know how the interview went. She had just touched a sore spot at that moment, and Hanmaru feels down, remembering his frustrations. His mother seems to understand the situation, and instead of criticizing him, she decides to encourage him for future attempts. Getting a pat on the back from a woman that big must have hurt. Besides the food, his mother also brings money. He feels awkward about accepting the money. Hanmaru tries to refuse, but she insists, and in the end, he accepts it, though truthfully he would have accepted it anyway. His mother starts reflecting on why he didn't do well in the interview, mentioning a fortune teller. After that, she says he needs to visit the mountains. Hanmaru doesn't understand anything and has a blank expression. The scene shifts to a port filled with boats. There he is, carrying a backpack. Hanmaru has been to that place before and never wanted to return. He stands still, waiting for something, while thinking about his beloved mother. Apparently, it was her idea to send him there to meet a shaman and discuss his career future. The shaman believes that Hanmaru's struggles aren't due to ADHD or panic attack. It has been 20 years since his father left home and never returned because he died in that mountain. And according to the shaman, the spirit of Hanmaru's father, who died in that mountain, is blocking his path. The shaman says he needs to go to the mountain and offer liquor to appease his father's spirit. Finally, Hanmaru arrives at the place. At that moment, he opens the door and steps inside. Looking down, Hanmaru sees the figure of a small boy. The boy starts running further inside, stopping in front of a door as if he wants to open it. Slowly, the boy pushes the door open, revealing a figure deep inside. In the darkness, a man stands with his back turned, but it is not yet possible to tell who he is. The boy fully opens the door and looks inside. Apparently, this is a memory. In that scene, he tells his father that he is hungry. However, the father does not respond, which is very strange. He only emits a sinister sound. With each passing moment, his expression becomes more terrifying. In reality, this wasn't real, and it didn't make sense for it to be. It was merely an illusion, and there was nothing there. Even so, Hanmaru feels an overwhelming dread. He places his hand on his chest, feeling suffocated. He tries to breathe slowly to catch his breath. Hanmaru then decides to hurry up with the ritual so he can leave, pulling the liquor from his backpack. He opens the bottle and begins preparing the offering. He pours the liquor onto the ground, making the tribute to the spirits, explaining that he is there at his mother's request. He wishes for his father to be at peace wherever he may be, and also takes the opportunity to pray to the spirit of the mountain, talking about his father who left home. As he remembers the hardships his mother faced raising him alone, everything seems calm as he continues the ritual. Suddenly, Hanmaru notices a yellow haze and wonders if there's a fire nearby. He decides to leave quickly, and as he hurries, repeats to himself that safety comes first. To his surprise, it seems like someone within the yellow haze repeats the same words. Hanmaru stares into the dense yellow fog, what seemed to be just a cloud of yellow smoke in that place. He now sees a black silhouette holding what appears to be a spear. Looking closer, he realizes it's a person, or at least something that looks like a person. The silhouette moves forward slowly, and Hanmaru notices that the spear is actually a bamboo stick. Soon, a bizarre monster appears, repeating his words, "Safety comes first." Hanmaru believes it's just another one of his hallucinations, but this time it feels more vivid than ever. The creature approaches and he realizes that half of its head is missing. Sensing an ominous presence, Hanmaru decides it's time to run. Before he can, the sound of a stabbing pierces the air. Our protagonist realizes that the bamboo stick has gone straight through his stomach. At that moment, he starts bleeding uncontrollably, asking himself if this is how he's going to die. After all those years of studying and working without ever enjoying life, is this his end? On the other hand, he thinks that at least he won't have to worry about getting a job anymore. But then he remembers his gigantic mother, the only person who would truly mourn his death. Thinking of his mother, Hanmaru regains a bit of determination. Even as he coughs up blood, he struggles to pull out the bamboo impaled in his stomach. Fighting through the pain, he repeats to himself that he can't die yet. The grotesque creature appears before him again, repeating the same phrase, "Safety comes first." It opens its enormous, terrifying mouth, lunging to devour Hanmaru. Inside the mouth, there is a large, unblinking eye staring at him. There is something deeply unsettling about that eye. The creature leaps at him, preparing to bite off his head. Hanmaru desperately tries to shake the monster off, but he can't avoid a bite to his shoulder. He screams in agony, The pain is unbearable, and at that moment, his consciousness begins to fade. Just then, he recalls words from the past, "Eat, eat." They are memories of his father, a terrifying hallucination of that moment when he begged for food. The image of his father, with a horrific expression, echoes in his mind, shouting the word "eat." As Hanmaru continues coughing up blood, an unexpected idea pops into his mind. He decides to return the bite. Summoning the last of his strength, Hanmaru bites into the creature fiercely, tearing off a chunk of its flesh. The scene is grotesque, a fusion of horror and desperation. To his surprise, he actually manages to wound the creature. The bizarre events continue as the creature lets out a horrifying scream. Inside its mouth, there is a green eye, the same one that was inside the creature's jaws. A special focus is placed on this eye. After all, there may be something significant behind it, or perhaps behind the dark mark at its center, which stands out prominently. A distorted caricature of Hanmaru appears in that center, in a nightmarish vision. It almost feels like a glimpse into hell, where monsters devour other monsters. Hovering over this scene, an eye remains still, simply watching. Everything suddenly goes dark, and our protagonist tastes metal in his mouth. As he slowly begins to open his eyes, Hanmaru hears a voice calling out and responds, asking who is speaking. Finally, he sees two people complaining that he is in a restricted area. Hanmaru is alive, and his mouth is full of blood. Startled, he asks where the monster and the yellow dust went. The young man, puzzled, asks Hanmaru to repeat what he just said. He explains that the monster emerged from the yellow dust to attack him. The young man remains intrigued, struggling to understand how such a thing could have happened. Our protagonist finds it strange that his stomach is completely intact after the attack. The two other individuals exchange glances as if they know something. Apparently, they were tracking the monster. While the young man believes Hanmaru killed the creature, the woman doubts it. She explains that even when someone gains demonic power, they can't use it immediately. The young man reflects on this for a moment. Hanmaru tries to gather himself when he is suddenly questioned. The young man wants to know if he remembers anything from the previous day. Hanmaru appears disoriented and doesn't realize that a day has passed. He checks his phone and is shocked by the date. Hanmaru complains about passing out for an entire day because of the monster. The young man concludes that if Hanmaru survived, he must have gained some ability to fight the creature. The woman remains skeptical, but the young man insists she should believe since they've been through similar situations before. At that moment, he approaches Hanmaru. Smiling, the young man says that he arrived just in time to participate. Hanmaru asks, "Participate in what?" The young man simply tells him to follow and change his clothes. The scene shifts to what appears to be a cluster of houses above a port. Now we are at the HQ of the Emergency Dust Department. Special Services, Official Government, New Employee Orientation. Hanmaru doesn't understand anything and stands still with a dumbfounded expression. He feels like he's in another job interview, only this time wearing summer clothes. Hanmaru reflects on how he ended up following the instructions of a government officer. He waits with the other participants, all of whom seem nervous. Hanmaru keeps wondering how he got dragged into this. The nervous expressions of the others catch his attention. A clattering sound of wooden sandals begins to echo. Apparently, a woman is entering the room, and there is a podium with a microphone. She introduces herself as the head of the Seoul City HQ and congratulates the new employees of the Ministry of Environment. Hanmaru interrupts her for a moment and expresses his concerns, believing he's in the wrong place. The chief responds that he made no mistake and was recruited as a special officer. Hanmaru is completely lost. He never applied for this position. The chief explains that the special officers of the Ministry of Environment form a secret unit dedicated to protecting lives. She warns that any information leaks will be punished as violations of national security. Hanmaru realizes the seriousness of the situation. The chief mentions that there is a small chance of gaining demonic abilities by consuming demon blood, which seems to be the case for everyone present. Although Hanmaru is still in disbelief, he starts recalling the horrifying events, remembering that he was bitten by the monster. The chief explains that monsters only appear in uninhabited mountains, and that yellow dust always emerges when monsters are nearby. There is a concentration level of yellow dust that ranges from 1 to 10. The higher the level, the stronger the demon. The chief calls out the name of a young man among them and expresses excitement about working with him, as he obtained the abilities of a level 7 demon. It seems like an impressive feat, but the young man avoids boasting. She continues flipping through her notepad, turning the pages, and then calls our protagonist, who has acquired the abilities of a demon of level. Although she doesn't know which ability it is, Hanmaru admits that he doesn't know either. The level 7 ability wielder starts mocking the protagonist, and Hanmaru becomes extremely annoyed by that arrogant jerk. However, he quickly composes himself, thinking that his abilities probably aren't anything special, and decides to leave. Suddenly, an alarm blares, startling everyone. The chief explains that the alarm signals the appearance of demons. Now outside, as they enter a forest, The chief escorts the group, stating that this is the perfect opportunity to practice their abilities. Hanmaru still doesn't understand why he was dragged into this, and he thinks about descending the mountain before the weather worsens, prioritizing his safety. He reflects on that word, safety. Then suddenly, he notices the yellow dust from before. The protagonist is startled by something. Within the dust, there was a black silhouette. It appeared to be a woman with long hair. At first glance, she looked ordinary, except for her arm, which had an unusual appearance. The woman turns, looking directly at Hanmaru, who becomes tense at that moment. A blade is embedded in a gigantic monster, which is enormous compared to the woman standing near it. Hanmaru can't believe what he's seeing. All the other recruits are equally astonished. The chief tries to encourage the group, who remain visibly tense. She asks for everyone's attention for a moment, and announces the start of practical training. She explains that despite the creature's colossal size, it is only a level 1 demon. She reassures them that there's no need to worry since Captain Kang has already driven a blade into the creature's brain. Captain Kang is part of the Gangwa Island team, and recognizes Hanmaru for having previously killed a demon on his own. She shows interest in discovering what ability he has acquired. The chief orders everyone to use their abilities to defeat the demon. Hanmaru, however, is absolutely terrified at that moment. After all, the creature is gigantic and horrifying. How could he possibly fight something like that? Hanmaru begins having a panic attack, struggling to breathe. His chest aches intensely, and his heart suddenly races, pounding faster and faster. Then, Hanmaru feels an overwhelming hunger. Amidst the river of blood in his hallucination, a black silhouette begins to walk. Hanmaru is still dazed, unable to comprehend what is happening. The black monster approaches closer and closer, while Hanmaru, with his back turned, remains paralyzed. The creature, with a terrifying canine-like form, draws near and begins whispering the word eat. No one notices what Hanmaru is going through at that moment. He starts salivating uncontrollably, overwhelmed by an insatiable hunger. It feels like his hunger is spiraling completely out of control. The protagonist's expression suddenly becomes bizarre, and he starts drooling like a dog about to feast on its meal. It seems like he can't hold back any longer. Someone taps him on the back, bringing him back to reality. The young man asks if he was laughing because he was scared. Hanmaru explains that he's acting strangely because he's starving. The other guy finds Hanmaru's behavior pathetic, something typical of a new. He probably has a superiority complex and thinks he's better than everyone. Hanmaru wonders what that sudden surge of hunger was all about. The chief calls for everyone's attention before they activate their abilities, as she wants to explain something very important. She states that this thick yellow dust is generated by demons. The denser it is, the stronger the demon. Inside the yellow dust, monsters have immense regenerative abilities, but that's basically it. There's no big secret. The chief then cuts her own hand, leaving the group utterly confused. She explains that since they carry demon blood, they can also regenerate within the yellow dust. However, fatal blows can still kill them, and their abilities can only be used inside the yellow dust. Outside of it, they are just normal humans. The veteran is bored by the explanation, and believes the most important part is how to activate the power. He then prepares to do something. In a strangely intense scene, he lightly bites his lip, and as he bleeds, he starts absorbing the yellow dust. Apparently, that's how the power is activated. He gains immense strength, and his gaze becomes sharp. The young man explains that the power is triggered when yellow dust enters a wound. He then puts on a glove on one of his hands, and right after that, he breaks his own finger for some reason. At that moment, his power activates. Meanwhile, the creature manages to dislodge the blade stuck in its forehead. Captain Kang immediately orders everyone to stay on high alert. A sandstorm swirls around the group, with the monster lurking inside, its silhouette barely visible. The creature begins to scream endlessly, seemingly preparing to attack. The beast slams its fist into the ground with full force, sending shards flying toward our protagonist's group. Kang attempts to intervene but is stopped by the chief. The chief insists that Kang must not interfere in this battle, even after being warned that this is too much for beginners. She explains that there is no time for practice. They need to learn by dealing with a monster of this level. At that moment, the creature starts sniffing something. Something in particular is drawing the monster's attention. Suddenly, it locks eyes on Hanmaru for some unknown reason. Hanmaru finds it strange that the monster is staring directly at him. The creature raises its hand, and a blade forms. The beast then hurls the blade straight at Hanmaru, hitting him squarely. Captain Kang is furious at what just happened. Hanmaru, injured in the shoulder, begins screaming uncontrollably. It seems like the pain is unbearable, but the attack isn't over yet. The creature charges at him again, lands right next to him, and stands face to face with Hanmaru, who is absolutely terrified. The two lock eyes for a brief moment. The creature reaches out its hand, preparing to do something, but suddenly, the ground starts shifting. A bizarre centipede lunges at the demon, immobilizing it. The monster struggles but is unable to break free from this gigantic centipede, which has a demonic appearance. It is then revealed that the centipede is an ability belonging to another member of the group. While the demon remains restrained, a girl launches her attack. She prepares herself, leaps high into the air, and slashes the monster's head. Her ability, which grants her a beast-like appearance, is called Hojo Demon. The creature loses half of its head and begins sucking in sand. The attacking duo celebrates, believing they have defeated the monster. However, the creature suddenly starts sucking sand into its head wound, and bubbles begin forming, indicating rapid tissue regeneration. The head fully regenerates, and the beast grins wickedly. The duo is in disbelief at the speed of the regeneration. The demon then grabs the centipede and easily frees itself from it, making the man's ability useless at that moment. The monster attacks again. Using the centipede's limb, it hurls the ability user toward the beast-like girl, but the attack isn't over yet. The creature pulls the young man closer using his own arm, grabbing the centipede user's neck brutally. He is in shock and cries out in pain, unable to do anything. As the creature begins to open its mouth, the mouth stretches open in an unbelievable way, growing enormous. The young man who put on the glove earlier breaks another one of his fingers. Suddenly, the creature is hit by something, and finally releases the centipede user. We then learn that his ability is called Temple Demon. Although it's unclear what exactly it does, the attack hit the monster head-on. The monster tries to counterattack by launching a blade, but the guy with the glove seems completely unfazed. He then decides to remove the glove from his hand. Out of nowhere, the lunatic breaks his own wrist. Mysteriously, at the same moment, the monster's neck twists violently, delivering a brutal attack in a bone-chilling scene. The creature collapses to the ground like dead weight. The young man smirks, placing his foot on the monster's head, explaining that they can defeat a demon by cutting off its head and stopping it from emitting dust. The group is impressed by witnessing a level 7 ability, but the young man seems slightly frustrated that he didn't get to test other techniques. Captain Kang, clearly irritated, scolds the young man, accusing him of breaking her blade on purpose to free the monster. He denies it and asks if she has proof. Furious at his arrogance, Kang grabs his arm, and the two start arguing right there. The chief interrupts them by clapping her hands, praising the group's performance for their first time. But she points out that something very strange happened. Hanmaru was no longer among them. Somewhere else, Hanmaru is running wildly through the forest. He reflects on how he just became a public servant and was already thrown into an absurd situation, forced to fight a monster. For some reason, he suddenly stops. Something is above him, and he looks up. The scene then shifts back to the chief, who comments that Hanmaru is unqualified for having fled the battle. Kang, on the other hand, is deep in thought, thinking about everything that just happened, questioning why the monster was so fixated on Hanmaru. It makes no sense since he is just a beginner. The chief orders a supervisor to find him, but also notices something unusual. Even though the monster has been defeated, there is still a lot of yellow dust in the area. The chief agrees that something is very strange. The scene changes to the entrance of a temple, where a massive amount of yellow dust is being emitted. Hanmaru stands before the entrance, horrified. Inside the dust, sinister noises echo, hinting that something is approaching. A very strange creature begins emerging from the sand. As it is almost fully out, Hanmaru tries to hide behind a bush. Our protagonist's situation is getting worse, jumping from one crisis to another. Trying to stay hidden, Hanmaru checks to see if the creature is still there, but he loses sight of it. He wonders if it's safe to come out, but suddenly, the monster appears behind him. The scene cuts back to the group of officers, where a female officer calls for Kang. Yoseok is out of breath, and Kang is worried. She reports that the Central Command has issued an alert about a level 3 demon. The chief finds it impossible, stating that never in history have 2 demons appeared consecutively. Kang only wants to know where it happened. The scene shifts again to the edge of a restricted area. Someone is trying to climb over the fence. The person manages to jump over, and we discover that it is Hanmaru, running for his life like a madman. He screams for help, hoping that someone will save him, but at that moment he trips on a rock and tumbles down the slope. Completely banged up after the fall and dizzy, Hanmaru gathers himself and spots a small house. Wasting no time, he sprints toward it to hide. Finally, he reaches the place just in time. Panting from exhaustion, he tries to catch his breath, wondering if the creature managed to follow him. Soon, he finds out it did. The monster is outside. The creature has a strange, eerie appearance, with yellow leaf-like shapes surrounding its head. Suddenly, Hanmaru hears the sound of a gate opening and realizes that someone just arrived. Apparently, it's an elderly woman, likely the owner of the place. She complains about the yellow fog surrounding the area, saying she can barely see anything. The creature, however, immediately becomes alert. The old lady is in serious danger if nothing is done. Hanmaru tries to think of a way to help her, even though he knows he has no power to do anything. Then he reflects on what the chief said about regenerative abilities. Hanmaru comes up with an idea but knows he must be careful not to suffer a fatal wound, or he could end up dying for nothing. He questions whether it's worth risking his life for a stranger. Our protagonist concludes that safety comes first. Outside, the old lady asks if there's someone she knows nearby. The monster starts repeating her words, which makes the elderly woman quite annoyed. She finally manages to see a bit more clearly and spots the enormous creature standing in front of her. The old lady is shocked, completely confused, while the monster continues mimicking her speech. Suddenly, the creature extends its hand toward the old woman, and the floating shapes around its head shift toward her. Spiked projectiles are hurled straight at the old woman. She closes her eyes, and all that can be heard is the sound of flesh being pierced. But when she slowly opens her eyes, she realizes that nothing hit her. There he was, Hanmaru, protecting her. He asks the old woman if she's okay, and she confirms that she is. However, she notices something horrifying. His arm has been torn off. Hanmaru simply tells her to run. Frustrated with his level 1 demon ability, he believes that this is the end for him. He feels completely powerless in this situation, unable to even protect himself, and the old lady might die right there. The protagonist desperately wishes for someone strong to appear and help them. He keeps begging for help until something strange begins to happen. His severed arm starts absorbing sand, and his body begins to transform. His heartbeat speeds up uncontrollably. He inhales the yellow dust, and just like before, begins salivating intensely, as if he were a starving beast. Without thinking, Hanmaru lunges at the creature. The scene cuts to Captain Kang, who, upon hearing something, stops and notices that the sound is coming from a house. When she finally arrives at the house, she witnesses something that leaves her speechless. In a bizarre scene, Hanmaru is eating the creature. Kang is completely stunned by the sight. The beast, trying to defend itself, grabs Hanmaru's head, lifts him up, and brutally hurls him away. Our protagonist is sent flying and only stops when he crashes into a rock. Hanmaru, dazed from the impact, still feels his heart pounding wildly. The creature also looks severely wounded and is unable to regenerate the area where it was bitten, which confuses Kang greatly. This makes no sense. Now is not the time to think about it. Quickly, Kang rushes in to finish the creature. She performs a swift acrobatic leap over the monster, reaching one of the spikes on its head. Gripping it tightly, she uses the spike to wound herself, activating her transformation. After a perfect superhero landing, the name of her ability is revealed, Iron Demon. The creature enters a full-blown rage and prepares to fire more spikes. The spikes come hurtling at high speed. Kang is completely focused on the battle and manages to deflect all the projectiles, some of which ricochet back toward the creature, forcing it to defend itself. Seizing the opportunity, Kang prepares a finishing move. The creature is sliced in half by a deadly cutting attack. The strike proves highly effective. The monster begins to disintegrate, while Kang executes another flawless landing. She remains still for a moment, watching to ensure it's truly over. The creature starts to vanish, signaling that it has been completely defeated. Kang then turns her attention to the elderly woman nearby, who had fainted on the spot. The old woman is just unconscious, and Kang tries to wake her up. The elderly woman finally regains consciousness and asks what happened. Kang lies to her, saying that it was a bear attack. Apparently, yellow dust causes amnesia, and civilians cannot remember what happened. Kang reassures the old woman, stating that the public service will handle the situation. Grateful, the old woman returns inside her home. Now Captain Kang's focus shifts. She heads to the location where our protagonist lies. Kang wonders what's wrong with this rookie. She is shocked by his regeneration ability, as his arm has already fully regenerated. This makes Kang seriously doubt that Hanmaru only has a level 1 ability. The next day, Hanmaru wakes up to a notification. He has been summoned for a job the following day, but just remembering the dangers and the near-death situations he faced the day before, our protagonist becomes depressed and doesn't want to go. He is still recovering from the shock, so Hanmaru lies back down, determined not to go. However, he remembers how desperate he was for a job and starts reconsidering his options. After much thinking, he decides to go back to sleep. The protagonist remains lying in bed. During his sleep, something strange seems to be happening. He is tormented by nightmares of demons. Horrific images keep flashing through his mind, until a voice calls out to him, telling him to come back. Hanmaru suddenly wakes up in fear, unable to fall asleep again because of the nightmares. He notices a glow coming from outside, opens the window, and sees something strange. The protagonist peeks outside to figure out what's happening. There is a fire burning at the top of the mountain. The scene cuts to the mountain, where there is a fire elemental creature. Apparently, this demon is the cause of the fire. At the scene, a watertight demon officer is battling the monster, likely an officer in charge of protecting that area. Using her power, she continues to fight the creature. Another officer with ice-based abilities prepares a powerful attack and successfully freezes the demon's body. The water and ice combo was effective, completely freezing the demon. She complains that demons shouldn't be appearing at night, while her partner reminds her to focus on fire prevention. The creature is immobilized for now, and the ice officer takes responsibility for finishing the monster. She gets ready, forming a side-shaped rattle. The officer charges at the demon, but something very strange happens. A dark force strikes the creature and seems to control it, saying, "Bring him to me." The creature enters a berserker state, becoming even more powerful. The ice officer tries to react quickly, but the demon's fist, already headed toward her, ends up hitting her directly. Even though she tries to defend herself, she is sent flying, and only stops after crashing into a tree. Apparently, she is seriously injured, with burns all over her body. The water officer grows concerned for her leader. The creature prepares another fire attack. Magma-like larvae begin flying from its back. The ice officer wonders why the demon is getting stronger. Meanwhile, at Seoul headquarters, inside the command center, the chief is monitoring the situation. The situation appears to be critical. The headquarters is receiving non-stop emergency calls. There are attacks in 20 different locations across the country, and the demon's appearance pattern is abnormal. The chief recalls that something similar happened before, so she isn't entirely surprised. Just then, an urgent call comes in. She answers a call from Ba Myung-sik, the branch director in Busan. She asks him about the situation. The scene shifts to Ba's location. He identifies himself to the chief, greets her, and asks when she'll visit Busan. But the chief tells him to get straight to the point. He quickly begins explaining what's happening. Ba reports that a portal has remained open for 3 consecutive days in a mountain in the region. The chief is shocked by this revelation. He continues, stating that his team keeps eliminating creatures, but they keep emerging non-stop. As a result, the local team is completely exhausted. A mysterious hooded creature comes into view. As the chief tries to understand why the portal remains open, the hooded beast begins stepping out of the portal. Strangely, the beast emits normal sounds. The hooded creature is about to emerge fully from the portal. Someone with the ability to translate demon language manages to decipher what it says. It's a single phrase, "Bring him to me." The chief is stunned and asks, "Bring who?" At that moment, the beast leaps out of the portal, revealing its peculiar form. The beast lands softly on the ground. Still on the call, Bae tells the chief that he doesn't know who the creature is looking for, but it seems crucial that it is here. The team defending the mountain begins preparing to face the creature. The chief ends the call at that moment, clearly shaken and full of unanswered questions. The scene shifts to a helicopter flying over the mountain. Inside, a man is on the phone. On the other end, someone updates him on the situation, saying that the chaos in Busan's mountain is out of control. The man in the helicopter receives the information, stating that he is almost there and promises to report back once the job is done. Without hesitation, the man jumps from the helicopter. During his suicidal dive, something spectacular happens. A beam of light cuts through the sky, illuminating the night like a falling star. The young man continues his descent until he finally reaches the range of the yellow dust. Then he begins to inhale the powder. His gaze changes instantly. Something is different about his body. Finally, he uses his demonic ability, spatial inversion. His body turns, with his feet pointing toward the ground. Elegantly, he lands on the rooftop like a feather falling. The most graceful hero landing you'll see today. The mountain team, exhausted and struggling to survive, notices the young man's arrival. No one knows who the man that appeared out of nowhere is. The woman asks him to leave, saying it's dangerous. The Assassin's Creed-like monster is right there, giving an incredibly sinister smile. The beast leaps with absurd speed, targeting one of the officers nearby. The girl barely notices the demon approaching. She loses her balance at the monster's arrival and falls to the ground. When she looks back to see what it was, she sees the massive figure of the beast ready to attack her. At that moment, the man who had jumped from the helicopter makes a strange movement. A black rift opens in the middle of space. The young man has opened a sinister portal with his hand. That was his ability, spatial rift. Without hesitation, he thrusts his hand into the rift. In a chilling scene, after pulling his hand back out of the portal, the monster's head, along with its spine, had come out with it. The scene looked like a true fatality. The people who witnessed it are shocked. The man thanks everyone for their hard work, saying they can rest now because he will handle everything from here. Here, we finally discover who this mysterious reinforcement is, the strongest level 1 demonic ability user at the moment. Meanwhile, he is warming up to do something. Placing his hands on the ground, he says he will finish the job. Here, as he uses another ability, we learn who this man is. His name is Jong Il-do. What appears to be black threads begin to run across the ground until they reach a rock, using them to leap upward. The black threads leave the ground in a magnificent scene. The people present are impressed by the scene. The girl wonders what those black rifts are. The four-eyed guy says he has never seen these specific abilities in action before. Could this be the strongest ability of all? A new rift then opens. The scene cuts to Cheonggi Mountain in Seoul, where a fire is raging. Here, we see that creature from earlier. The Cheonggi officer is still fighting, but she is already at her limit. The officer tries to wake her partner so they can get out of there. The creature is about to launch an attack. The Cheonggi officer is on high alert. She then begins to use her ability. The creature strikes using its own strength. The officer tries to withstand the attack in any way possible. The creature continues pounding against the officer's shield, but the shield is already at its breaking point. Then, the shield shatters. The officer is sent flying from the force of the impact. The situation truly seems desperate. The creature prepares to finish the officer off. She then closes her eyes, expecting the worst. But something happens. A rift opens around the creature. Jong Il-do is somehow grabbing the monster's head. He then appears at the spot where the creature was, sending the monster flying far away. A loud impact can be heard, caused by his black rifts. The monster was truly overwhelmed. Jong Il-do then prepares to do something. He says he will take care of another place. He positions himself and gets ready to use his abilities. Jong Il-do then activates all of his rifts. We jump to Sorek Mountain in Gangwon Province. The situation there also seems critical. The monsters in that region are still behaving out normally. The creature is about to finish off the officer when a rift opens behind the demon. The monster is pulled into the rift. In other regions, the same thing is apparently happening. On Hala Mountain, on Jeju Island, the same thing occurs. The monsters are being simultaneously pulled into the rifts. This is an insanely powerful ability. Apparently, Jong Il-do is handling the threats in multiple locations at once. The rifts begin to close. At the HQ where the chief is, an officer announces that the yellow dust is disappearing in all areas. The chief says it is because of Jong Il-do. The scene cuts to where he is at that moment. He is there, in the middle of the forest, surrounded by the creatures he intentionally pulled there. Jong Il-do is extremely confident. The monsters then let out their war cries. Everyone charges at him at the same time. It looks like an incredible battle is about to unfold. Is he really that strong? Can he handle all the monsters at once? He then positions his hand, pointing at the monsters. A fissure opens in the shape of a slash. He uses spatial tear. Spinning 360 degrees, he manages to strike all the creatures. At that moment, all the beasts are eliminated. Everyone is in disbelief at the sight. It was a shock for some of those present. The fire monster didn't lose its head, but had its torso sliced in half. Apparently, Jong Il-do left it alive on purpose. He then calls the interpreter to try and translate what the beast is saying. It seems like he's trying to understand the situation and investigate the case. He wants to know about the anomalies and the frequent appearances this week. The interpreter translates what the monster is saying. Bring him to me. Jong Il-do asks who exactly this person is that it's looking for. Surprisingly, the creature responds, saying it's her husband. The interpreter is confused and thinks the monster is just mimicking human words. And if that's the case, there's nothing they can do. If they keep coming, the officers just have to keep killing them. Jong Il-do then gives a look of pure disdain. It seems like everything is over here. Now he has to deal with that portal that won't close. Jong Il-do prepares to use an ability again. He's going to try to close the portal somehow. A black rift appears, but this time it's much thicker and denser. The rift manages to swallow the portal whole. The officers feel relieved knowing they have someone so strong on their side. Jong Il-do is 50 years old despite his youthful appearance. It looks like he's finished performing his ability. The area becomes calm again, shrouded in silence. The scene cuts to the HQ building. Jong Il-do is there at HQ. The chief is caught off guard by his presence. She asks him where exactly he stuffed that portal. He replies that for now, the portal is inside his spatial dark zone. The chief responds that she wouldn't want to be in that portal's place. Jong Il-do says she's being overly dramatic. The chief is impressed that he managed to handle everything alone, but he says he has his limits. She admits that might be true and, continuing, prepares to show him something. We now see portraits of several people. Apparently, Jong Il-do had requested information about the new recruits. He wants to figure out who the demon is after. He suspects that the demon is targeting one of these recruits, and our protagonist is right there, scared out of his mind. The scene shifts to a terrifying sight, an endless horde of demons, but there's one in particular that stands out, a demon woman, the one with those peculiar eyes. And all she says it is, "Bring him to me," and that they need him. On a building, there's a sign that reads, "A city full of love is a great place to live." Our protagonist is at the emergency earthquake department. He says he's finally arrived. He thinks about his mother and how happy she must be knowing that her son finally got a job. He remembers how his mother was even crying with joy, and apparently he's doing this to make his mother proud. Once inside, he finds his senpai, who is drinking alcohol. and he's not happy to see our protagonist. The guy looks completely unkempt and reeks of alcohol. The rank 7 ability user seems furious about being there for some reason, but the drunk man retorts, saying there must be a reason they sent a level 7 ability user to this place. The drunk leader then welcomes our protagonist. Hanmaru is curious to know what exactly he'll be doing here. We see a door opening, and from inside, a red light shines through. Our protagonist freezes on the spot, and from within, a bunch of maniacs appear, cutting up bodies. It's impossible to understand what's happening here. After being paralyzed for a few seconds, someone calls out to him. The drunk leader tells Hanmaru to snap out of it, and apparently, it was all just an illusion that our protagonist had. He was worried for nothing. The drunk leader then introduces himself. His name is Go Deokman, 41 years old. The woman with glasses is Yeonji Woo, 36 years old. The guy trimming trees is Kim Whipak, 51 years old. And the girl with colored hair is Yoshioki, 25 years old. The drunk leader had done his job introducing everyone, so he disappeared from there. Our protagonist is now worried because he hasn't received any instructions. He finds himself unsure of what to do in that situation. The protagonist wants to talk to the others, but everyone seems too focused, so he holds back. However, he tries to interact with the guy who arrived with him, but the guy looks extremely unfriendly and bluntly tells the protagonist to go take a hike for half an hour. Hanmaru realizes that all his colleagues are insane. The grumpy guy is frustrated about being sent to the reinforcement team, and the protagonist doesn't understand why that's a problem. So he tries to start a conversation with his colleague next to him, and is surprised by what she was doing on the computer. The protagonist asks what kind of work they do in this department. Then, the girl decides to explain it to him. There are 13 types of headquarters spread across different cities and countries. Those with level 7 abilities or higher are assigned to these headquarters for important missions, and the center they are in is the calmest place. This department is where weaker officers and civilians are sent. The protagonist then understands that this is where the weaklings are dumped, and apparently that's why everyone is so idle in this place. However, she explains that high-ranking individuals come here voluntarily, and he wonders who. At that moment, a stylish girl, completely soaked, appears. The protagonist seems to recognize her. Apparently, it's Captain Kang. Her colleague is annoyed because she showed up in this state. Captain Kang just ignores the girl, saying it's nothing, and that there's no reason to go home for things like this. The protagonist continues listening to the girl with colored hair. Kang then notices the protagonist's presence and recognizes him. She doesn't seem to remember how he ended up there. The protagonist is not happy with the information he just got. He's worried that he might become an easy target in this place. With so many weaklings around, he'll end up having to fight for his own life. The girl tries to calm him down, saying the salary is great. The protagonist then thinks about it and realizes he'll be earning 5 times more than he normally would. The girl confirms that's correct and tells him to shut up. She asks him to just wait for the alarm to go off. He wanted to ask her more questions but realized he was already being annoying, so he just waits for the alarm to sound. A lot of time passes and nothing happens. It's easy to see why people just laze around here. The protagonist already feels at home in this environment. The drunk leader arrives at the place. Apparently, he had been sleeping. He greets everyone and tells them to get ready for work. He then approaches the grumpy guy and asks how his first day on the job was, but the guy doesn't want to talk. The protagonist takes the chance to ask him something. He asks about the demons and wonders where they come from. The lazy leader responds that he doesn't really know where they come from or what they are. The girl with colored hair joins the conversation and says, they just come from above. The protagonist is genuinely concerned that no one has ever researched where these creatures originate from. He says that this is really frustrating. The protagonist's life was drastically changed, and he doesn't understand why everyone here is so careless. The scene shifts to an HQ building where the chief is inside, apparently working. She steps out of the elevator, and on the floor where she stops, she encounters someone. That person is the young man with level 1 demonic abilities. The chief then reports that the pattern of demon appearances is returning to normal. The young man just listens, standing still while observing a glass enclosure. Inside the glass, there is a dense yellow dust. The young man asks if she has discovered the cause of these anomalies while observing a creature. She says no, but that this could be a sign that they are getting closer to something. Here we get a glimpse of the creature. The young man says he can't draw conclusions yet, but asks the chief to alert all the leaders as chaos might break out soon. The scene shifts back to the protagonist, who looks shocked by something. Apparently, they are having a feast, chatting about a certain prophecy. The girl with glasses says they should have more parties like this. The protagonist is a bit lost in the conversation and asks about this prophecy. The drunk leader says there is a prophecy that states that demons will fall from the sky 1 year from now. The protagonist starts to imagine a horde of demons descending from the heavens. He feels tormented just thinking that something like this is going to happen. The drunk leader says it's a state secret. The girl with glasses encourages everyone to keep drinking. while the tree guy is apparently just sipping tea. The girl with colored hair seems like she just wants to go home. Captain Kang tells everyone to take it easy, but the grumpy rookie couldn't handle the drinking anymore. There's a relaxed atmosphere, except for our protagonist who is still worried. This messes with Han Maru's head, and he doesn't understand why these people act this way. The scene cuts to the top of a mountain, where something is glowing yellow. Apparently, the yellow glow is a portal, just like the one from before. Something big is about to happen. We see a demonic hand emerging from the portal. Apparently, a monstrous aberration is about to step out. The beast was almost through the portal. The scene cuts to where our group was, and the alarm starts blaring. Everyone goes on full alert. It was nighttime, and there shouldn't be any incidents during the night. Captain Kang is already getting ready to leave. The level 7 ability user says he'll go with her, but Captain Kang tells him he won't. That's because she wants to take our protagonist instead, shocking him. Then they leave by car. Our protagonist seems a little drunk at the moment. He doesn't understand why he was dragged into this, since he won't be able to do anything. Then Captain Kang suddenly starts talking to him. She tells him not to worry about the prophecy. He replies that there's no way he can't be worried. Captain Kang says that the big shots must have made preparations for when that day comes, and she continues, telling him to focus on the present and complete his current mission. But he is still terrified. She tries to encourage him, saying that he must have some kind of special ability. The two continue driving. The protagonist feels awkward. He's not used to receiving compliments. Kang keeps talking, saying that she has never seen anyone bite like that. She remembers that previous situation with the protagonist. The protagonist looks a bit confused and asks, "What do you mean?" Then he remembers the first monster he fought. He asks Kang to explain herself. She tells him that he has the ability to literally devour demons. The protagonist is horrified by what the captain just said. The two continue their journey for now. Finally, they arrive at the creature's location. The demon is impaled through the mouth. Kang tells the creature to shut up. Apparently, she wants the protagonist to eat the demon. He asks if she's being serious. She confirms, saying that she saw him do it before and thought it was incredible. She tells him to stop wasting time and just eat the thing already. The protagonist thinks that it makes sense. If he has an ability, he should practice using it. To make it easier, he tries to imagine the demon's flesh as octopus meat. Then he finally prepares to take a bite. Apparently, he just licked the thing. Kang gets annoyed and tells him to bite it properly, but the protagonist thinks it's disgusting. Finally, here it comes. Our protagonist takes a big bite out of the tentacle. The next day, at the department, Han Maru is lying face down on his keyboard. His teammates heard that he completely messed up on the mission. The protagonist asks, "What do you mean?" In reality, the guy is just mad that he didn't get to go instead of the protagonist. The guy is actually pretty proactive and says that he lost a chance to be trained by Captain Kang because of the protagonist. So he's absolutely pissed and calls the protagonist a wimp. And he's not wrong. The protagonist really needs to wake up to reality. Suddenly, the alarm goes off. Captain Kang calls for the protagonist again. When she looks toward Han Maru's workspace, he was already gone. The scene shifts to a men's restroom. Han Maru was inside for some reason. He's freaking out because he couldn't eat a demon. He thinks that he has an ability, but it's completely useless. So he simply doesn't want to go to today's emergency mission and considers just leaving it for another day. As he exits the restroom, he runs into Captain Kang in the hallway, completely soaked. She asks him where he was hiding. The protagonist makes up an excuse, saying he had food poisoning. It's unclear if she bought the excuse or not. Kang tells him that he doesn't seem suited for this kind of job. She says that he doesn't have to work for the government just because he has a demonic ability. He just needs to sign an absolute silence agreement and remain under surveillance for the rest of his life. Being monitored for life really worries him, but she says that it's still better than dying. Mentally weak people, like him, tend to die early, and given the circumstances, he might even end up killing a civilian by accident. Then she concludes, "It's better to quit this job if you can't handle it." Captain Kang walks up beside the protagonist. She tells him that he's not a nobody. Han Maru reflects deeply on those words. Kang just walks away, leaving the protagonist behind. The place falls silent, and the only sound is her footsteps fading away. Back at the office where everyone was just killing time, the drunk leader is already missing Han Maru. Captain Kang also notices that he's no longer there. The scene shifts to an outdoor location with a bridge. Our protagonist is there, staring at the sea. Apparently, he feels happy. Being monitored for life is still better than dying. So he takes out his phone to share the news with his mother. There's no point in staying at this job if a horde of demons is going to show up in a year. Finally, his mother answers the call. Han Maru asks where she is. She says she's at Yanwang Mountain. The protagonist questions why she's on a mountain, even though he explicitly told her never to go to one. But she can't hear him properly. She complains about the heavy yellow dust in the area. The protagonist is shocked by what he just heard, and then the call disconnects. He starts thinking about the yellow dust. Meanwhile, at that same mountain, a team of officers is on site to handle a level 5 monster. There are 3 people, but one of them seems a bit strange. An officer approaches the guy to check what's wrong, and the guy is completely frozen because he just saw a demon sitting in a tree, and the demon was eating a human arm. It was a brutal sight, and the monster looked terrifying. The scene cuts back to our protagonist. Meanwhile, where the battle was happening, we see the centipede ability user. It looks like things are getting really bad. The demon, which was supposed to be weak, is absolutely destroying everyone. Finally, a huge panting guy arrives at the scene. He seems to be the team leader and has the ability to multiply himself. A member of the group simply follows orders to request reinforcements and leave the area. At the edge of the restricted zone, he reaches a phone that was placed near the perimeter fence. Phones aren't supposed to work in the yellow dust, but for some reason this one does. The scene shifts to HQ. The chief is there and has just received a request for support for Yinwang Mountain. If the threat spreads beyond the hiking trail, there will be serious problems. There are civilians in the area, and this could lead to casualties. If the beast reaches the city, there will be massive deaths. The city would be completely devastated, and this absolutely cannot happen. The chief can't waste any more time, so she orders the teams to head to the site and handle the problem. The scene shifts to a car speeding toward the location. It's the protagonist, and he rushes out of the car. At the entrance, there's a sign stating that the area is closed. The people there are being stopped from going inside. The protagonist tries to find his mother in the crowd, but he doesn't see her. Thinking that she's still up in the mountains, he tries talking to the officials controlling the situation, but the guy stops him, saying that there are wild animals in the area and it's too dangerous. Obviously, the protagonist knows there are no wild animals there, so he leaves to find another way in. Our protagonist is trying to bypass the blockade. He starts descending a cliff. Hanmaru tries to do it quickly, because his mother could be in danger. The yellow dust is already visible from there. The scene cuts to someone who has injured their foot. Due to the low visibility, a woman tripped and twisted her ankle. This extremely muscular woman appears to be the protagonist's mother. She is helping another woman and says she'll take care of her. Inside the yellow dust, the protagonist's tough mother notices a dark silhouette. It looks extremely strange. She can't see it clearly, but she strains her eyes to try and get a better look. Then a hand suddenly emerges from the yellow dust. The tough mother flinches for a moment, but that thing inside the yellow dust was her son, Hanmaru. She asks how he found her. He replies that he saw her post, but she questions why he didn't go to work. The protagonist says that's not important right now. The tough mom's friend asks if this is the son she bragged about becoming a public servant, and she proudly confirms, saying that all that's left is for him to find a girlfriend. The protagonist gets irritated by the random conversation and tells the two of them to leave immediately. Then he notices something strange. He looks up and sees something in the tree. It was the demon from the incident. The protagonist starts feeling sick. He's starting to have a panic attack again. He wonders what he should do now. Last time, he fainted just from seeing the demon, and now he questions what he can do. The protagonist is really not okay, and the two women start getting worried. Hanmaru then begins to lose consciousness. Tough Mom tries to wake him up somehow. The demon prepares to strike. The creature leaps down from the tree. The monster is about to reach the two women. The protagonist, seeing this, tries to do something, but he ends up rolling down the hill. Our protagonist needs to act fast. The creature is about to reach Tough Mom. The beast prepares to bite the protagonist's mother. The situation is really serious. The protagonist shouts for his mother at that moment. Then suddenly, something happens. Something hits the creature. The protagonist doesn't understand what's going on. He wonders where those blades that struck the creature came from. Tough Mom asks Hanmaru what that creature is. The two women ask what's on the protagonist's head. Not understanding what they're talking about, he looks up. He realizes there are things floating above his head. He panics when he sees the blades surrounding him. Then he remembers the monster that had those same floating objects over its head. Then he feels something extremely weird in his body. The protagonist's shirt is torn, and his back feels restrained. A bone emerges from the middle of his back. That bone then floats above his head. Apparently, he has some control over these things. He wonders how he's able to use this demonic ability, and he starts remembering the time he bit the creature. Could this be related? If his bite stops demons from regenerating, could he also absorb their abilities? Then he thinks that maybe he can defeat the demon with this new power. But apparently, the creature was weak and had already collapsed after the last attack. The scene shifts to the team guarding the mountain. One of the team members who was supposed to guard the mountain is approached by some people. He wonders if the guy is okay. The two middle-aged men ask how critical the situation is right now. One of the men with ridiculous hair asks why their team let the creature escape. The guy responds, saying that the creature wiped them out. But the Mosquito Airport guy doubts that, since the team's leader is a level 7 ability user. So the two become curious about what kind of ability a level 5 monster has. And he responds, Mirror. Back at the protagonist's confrontation site, the creature is lying on the ground, with what appears to be a mirror embedded in its forehead. The protagonist then notices a sinister glow coming from the creature. The monster gets into position to do something. Spikes begin to emerge from its back. Our protagonist goes on full alert. Apparently, the mirror creature copies the abilities of others. The protagonist is hit by the same ability he had just used on the creature. Hanmaru takes the attack head-on. Our protagonist is completely wrecked. He realizes that the creature copied his ability. The creature charges at him. The protagonist removes the bone spikes from his face and tries to pull out the others scattered across his body. Apparently, he's still okay. He must have some kind of plan in mind right now. Our protagonist then snaps his fingers for some reason. The monster mimics the protagonist's movement. It does the exact same thing. Our protagonist feels horrible. In the background, Tough Mom is struggling. Our protagonist turns back to see if he can help her somehow, and apparently she busted her knee. Tough Mom is worried about the protagonist bleeding, but Hanmaru reassures her, showing that he isn't actually bleeding at all. Right now, the protagonist has something else to worry about. Our protagonist tells his mother to hide somewhere and prepares to face the monster. Hanmaru's mother is confused, so Hanmaru explains that he is a public servant and his job is to protect civilians. He says he'll end this in an instant. Hanmaru then gains momentum and charges at the demon. Our protagonist grabs the creature. The two engage in close combat. Hanmaru drags the creature off the cliff with him. Tough Mom starts screaming in panic, but the two fall down and all that can be seen is a cloud of yellow dust. The scene shifts to the bottom of the ravine where our protagonist is completely wrecked and beneath him lies the creature. Even injured, our protagonist quickly gets up. Apparently, Hanmaru is already healing. Under him, he sees the creature still lying on the ground. Even if he can't defeat it, he just needs to buy time until the mountain's officer team arrives. Meanwhile, the dynamic duo of middle-aged men arrives where the fat guy was fighting the mirror creature. It looks like the monster copied the fat guy's ability and started multiplying. And unfortunately, the fat guy was defeated. The mirror demons turn their attention to the dynamic duo. They don't quite understand why there are so many identical monsters here. The Mosquito Airport guy explains that the beast must have copied the fat guy's abilities. The horde of monsters looks ready to launch an attack on the duo. The bald guy says they just need to destroy the main body, but to do that, they have to find it first. The other man gets excited, saying they just need to kill all of them. Then he gets ready to attack, leaping forward. The middle-aged man positions himself high up with clenched fists. He prepares to strike the monsters with a punch. The monsters are hit by a devastating attack from the middle-aged man. The Mosquito Airport guy calls him an idiot. Apparently, the demon's main body isn't there at all. Back at Hanmaru's battle, he is still fighting the mirror creature. Our protagonist complains about how fast the creature is regenerating. The protagonist complains about how difficult this situation is. The creature starts mimicking what his mother was saying. That pisses the protagonist off. Hanmaru then fires another attack at the creature, but it looks like he misses all his bone projectiles. The protagonist complains about his terrible aim. Now it's the monster's turn. It launches a bone attack at Hanmaru, and the attack lands perfectly on our protagonist. Unlike our protagonist, the monster actually knows how to aim. Hanmaru doesn't give up and fires another set of bone projectiles at the creature. The suspense builds. Will he actually hit it this time? And yes, he manages to land a hit on the demon. The protagonist celebrates his successful hit, but it turns out to be pointless. The creature quickly removes the bone and starts regenerating. Apparently, the monster's regeneration is even better than the protagonist. Then he starts thinking about what Captain Kang told him. Flashback to Captain Kang's scolding. Back then, he was getting scolded by her, and our protagonist was lying on the ground, discouraged. He complains that maybe he wasn't meant to fight in this field. He just can't fight. But Captain Kang didn't give up on him. To her, his real problem was fear. But there's no reason to be afraid since they can heal inside the yellow dust. But he argues that he still feels pain and keeps complaining, and that really pissed off Captain Kang at the time. He asks if there's another way to fight since he needs to get close to bite the creatures. She starts thinking that besides tearing off the monster's head, there might be another way, but our protagonist's abilities seem to be more support-based. However, she says that Hanmaru's regeneration is the strongest she's ever seen, so there's no reason for him to be afraid of fighting demons. Back to the present battle, he concludes that his regenerative ability is actually really strong. Plus, with his gluttony ability, he can now launch deadly attacks. The only thing he really needs to improve is his terrible aim. Then he reflects on how hard it is to aim properly. The creature is already close to him, so our protagonist decides to try something. He prepares another bone attack and fires it toward the monster. The creature simply dodges the attacks, but the monster senses that something is wrong. The lunatic Hanmaru charges into close combat, ripping one of the bones. Even the creature wasn't expecting something like this. The madman actually went down for a fight, engaging in hand-to-hand combat. As the creature was about to be struck, it stopped the bone blade with its teeth. Hanmaru didn't expect that to happen. The mirror demon then extended its hand, managing to grab our protagonist's neck. At that moment, the situation became very complicated for Hanmaru. The monster began speaking to our protagonist, asking why he was like this. The creature prepared to do something, gathering momentum. Then it jumped while still holding onto our protagonist. It seemed like the beast was about to finish him off. Hanmaru tried to break free from the monster somehow, but unfortunately, he was hit with that devastating attack. He couldn't breathe. His only way out would be to use his demonic gluttony ability. The monster kept trying to finish the job. Then the beast bit him at that moment. The protagonist was left stunned by the bite, but he thought fast, pulling a bone spike from his back, and he drove the bone into the mirror demon's neck. However, now our protagonist started bleeding because of the bite. The monster still seemed unfazed, and the bone spike attack wasn't very effective. Meanwhile, our protagonist was on the verge of losing consciousness. He could barely see the mirror demon at that moment. The situation seemed critical, and the bleeding wouldn't stop. Hanmaru wondered if his demonic gluttony ability had been copied. But what was even more concerning was the amount of blood he had already lost. If he collapsed, it would truly be the end. It seemed like our protagonist had finally fallen. But apparently, this was a memory from when he was with Captain Kang. He was trying to explain himself, saying that he suffered from panic attacks. The symptoms made him feel a tightness in his chest and a sensation of impending death. Kang simply said that if that was the case, then he needed to overcome it. If he couldn't, he would end up dying in the middle of one of those attacks. Kang stated that they were the last line of defense, and if they fell, the civilians would be left defenseless. Back in the forest, in the midst of the yellow mist, Hanmaru's mother was calling for him. Our protagonist was still alive despite his injuries, but the situation remained dire. Still holding a bone spike, the mirror demon continued to mimic him. Kang's words still echoed in his mind. Our protagonist was ready to go all in. He bit his lip, and then let out a battle cry. The beast did the same. The two charged at each other. The mirror demon prepared to drive the bone spike into our protagonist, and Hanmaru was struck in the abdomen. The impact was intensely felt, but he seized the opportunity to counterattack. While preparing one of his floating bone spikes, our protagonist grabbed the creature with all his strength. The beast struggled to break free by any means necessary, but Hanmaru didn't let that happen. The other spikes floating around started being drawn in. A pulling force attracted the bone spikes. They all rushed toward the protagonist and the monster. Then the spike struck the creature head-on, and the attack seemed effective, but it also hit our protagonist. He tried to endure it at all costs, and the spikes continued to tear through the creature. At that moment, Hanmaru aimed for a critical point in the creature, and fortunately, our protagonist succeeded. One of the spikes pierced the beast's neck, eliminating it instantly. In this battle, our protagonist had prevailed, and his effort was rewarded. Hanmaru was exhausted after this battle. He could hardly believe he had actually won, so he remained there for a while longer. The scene shifted to that stylish old man from before. At the location where the two middle-aged men had been fighting, the monsters began to disappear. The Mosquito Airport explained that the main body must have died. Then he wondered who could have killed the main body. Our protagonist was already almost completely recovered. Meanwhile, the creature was dead, and his wounds were healing, but he had truly thought he was going to die there. The protagonist decided to go after his mother, but suddenly he stopped when he heard someone whisper the word eat. He quickly turned around. However, he began hallucinating about a person telling him to eat it, and the person in the hallucination was apparently his father. Yet he didn't understand why the hallucination of his father was telling him to eat the creature. Then he started considering it, as the creature's ability was incredibly powerful. He even thought it would be good to acquire that ability using his gluttony power. At that moment, he remembers his senpai mentioning the prophecy of the end time. So for him, this is just another reason to grow stronger. Hanmaru prepares for the feast, and he really eats the creature, consuming everything without leaving a trace. At that moment, something seems to have changed in our protagonist. He decides that from now on, he will eat every demon he encounters. We are now in a hospital, and our protagonist's mother is there. As expected, she doesn't remember anything. This makes the protagonist relieved that she doesn't recall the events. Thinking about what happened, it would be problematic if she remembered the horrifying scene, the monstrous creature coming toward her, and the shock of that episode. The entire situation was reported as a fire in the mountains, and he uses that as an excuse to ask his mother not to go to the mountains anymore. His mother explains that she went there because she had heard that someone resembling his father was in the mountains. Thinking about this, the protagonist recalls that his father really did disappear in a mountain, and this might be connected to his hallucinations. He starts remembering them, someone vomiting blood, and a boy watching a monster in a tree devouring a person. These memories make him break into a cold sweat, because he didn't remember these things before. Hanmaru is lost in thought until his mother calls him. Concerned, she asks why he looks so pale. she continues, thinking it must be because of his new job. But Hanmaru reassures her and says that he's already getting used to it. Now we return to the officer's department, where there is a certain commotion. Our protagonist tries to arrive discreetly. A bit shy, he greets everyone with a good morning. But the Four Eyes says she hasn't forgotten that he disappeared the other day. And the guy with a difficult personality provokes him, saying he ran away out of fear. So the protagonist simply apologizes. Meanwhile, Captain Kang tries to defend him, saying she sent him home because he was sick. And at that, our protagonist is surprised. Kang seems to have her reasons for this. Meanwhile, Four Eyes is irritated at Kang for not sharing that information, and the two start arguing right there. At that moment, the alarm is triggered, fortunately, at a good time for Captain Kang. At that moment, the protagonist strangely takes advantage of the situation and asks to accompany Kang, and everyone is surprised to see this happening. The scene cuts to a mountain, where our team of officers is gathered. The protagonist apologizes for Kang taking the blame while trying to help him, but Kang explains that she felt guilty for saying harsh things to Hanmaru, and she is still curious about why he returned. Hanmaru explains that now he is completely ready to fight. At that moment, Captain Kang notices something strange. In the midst of the yellow haze, it was possible to see the shadow of something very fat. It was a demon, and everyone gets ready. Meanwhile, the creature, with the most bizarre appearance possible, emerges screaming, ready to fight. At that moment, Kang tells our protagonist not to go easy on a level 2 demon, mentioning that even the Yin Wang Mountain team was defeated by a level 5 beast, and apparently, it was reported that Seoul's headquarters took over the case. But that wasn't true. The girl with colored hair believes that a team of level 7 ability users was the one who defeated the mirror creature, and the protagonist is shocked at not receiving any recognition after suffering so much, because he can't even mention the case since Kang made up a story to protect him. While he bitterly reflects on this, Kang observes the level 2 creature crossing its arms. The protagonist tells the girls to leave the monster to him. At that moment, the protagonist takes responsibility and prepares to face the creature. The two are intrigued, and the girl with colored hair thinks he won't be able to handle a level 2 demon since he's only level 1. But he insists and says he will face the monster alone. The demon really is very strange, but then our protagonist gets ready for battle. Suddenly, he activates the mirror demon's ability, and he is excited to show off for the girls behind him. Then he begins to copy the monster's ability. At that moment, a horrible stench reaches the creature. The creature's ability seems to be an incredibly intense bad smell, and our protagonist is shocked, giving up on the ability and going straight for the attack. But just looking at the scene makes one want to vomit. Meanwhile, the girls behind him can't take it, because the smell is terrible and seems more like a chemical battle. Kang, standing nearby, is acting very strangely, so the girl wonders how a level 7 ability user was affected this way. The protagonist realizes that the girls are struggling, and from his expression, the situation looks tough. For some reason, he keeps copying the monster's ability, but he's clearly struggling to endure it. However, our protagonist holds his ground, and the two continue their stench battle, where they don't even touch each other and just compete in pure filth. At this stalemate, the protagonist decides to unleash his full power. Then he fires off a blast of filth, and the monster is hit directly and seems affected. The demon can't resist and collapses to the ground. Meanwhile, our protagonist remains standing, and the girls stand behind him, speechless. Hanmaru celebrates his victory. With that, the three head to the river to wash up. Captain Kang seems deep in thought, and the protagonist still feels a burning sensation in his eyes. Kang is curious about the protagonist's gluttony ability, but he explains that by eating a demon, he can use its abilities. The girl with colored hair interrupts to mock him for his stench battle, and our protagonist feels embarrassed because he hadn't realized how ridiculous the scene looked. But Captain Kang says she's impressed with his growth. At that moment, he becomes even more flustered at receiving the compliment, but Kang comments that eating demons is a bit disgusting, making him feel disheartened again upon hearing that. Kang says she has some things to take care of while the girl with colored hair keeps teasing him, so with nothing to do, he remains seated, still embarrassed for making a fool of himself with the mirror ability, because that moment was perfect to show his potential. Suddenly, someone arrives, greeting Hanmaru, and the protagonist asks who that man is. Without introducing himself, the elite officer asks if Hanmaru was the one who defeated the level 5 demon. Ildo is intrigued by the protagonist. After all, a level 5 demon was defeated by a level 1 ability user. Our protagonist, still feeling a bit awkward, says yes. This makes Ildo smile. Then he says he wants to take Hanmaru to the headquarters in Seoul. Our protagonist is a bit confused by the invitation. Ildo asks if he knows anything about the headquarters in Seoul City. The protagonist says yes and states that it's where the elite officers are stationed. so he's a bit confused about why he's being called there, and Ildo simply says that he knows how to recognize talent with potential. The protagonist doesn't quite understand what he means. The scene cuts to another location where Ildo is with the chief, and she's complaining because he rescheduled a meeting. But Ildo mentions that a new recruit caught his attention. Then the chief asks if it's his son. Apparently, his son was Eden, a level 7 ability user with a rotten personality. Ildo says that's not the recruit in question. His son became rebellious after the divorce, and he has no interest in meeting him at the moment. The chief asks if the recruit is connected to the last appearance of a high-level demon. Hilda replies that it's possible. The scene shifts to a place where another yellow portal exists, and apparently it's inside a house. Inside, a goblin monster is opening a refrigerator. It looks inside the fridge for some reason. Meanwhile, at the environmental department, we see our protagonist looking quite happy about something, and he's excited to finally be about to visit the HQ in Enshio. He's just a little worried because the elite officers fight high-level monsters, since his safety is his top priority. Even so, he's very happy that his potential was recognized. Eden, at that moment, stares at our protagonist. He calls him level 1, and asks why Hanmaru is so happy. Eden keeps provoking our protagonist for some reason. Hanmaru responds to the provocation by saying that Eden is an incompetent fool who failed to make it to headquarters. Then he asks who the real incompetent one is. Eden becomes furious at that moment, says the guy who uses armpit stench as an ability. The protagonist is caught off guard and asks how Eden knew about that episode. It was definitely the girl with colored hair who leaked the information. She had spread it to the entire department. Even the protagonist senpai couldn't hold back his laughter. Four Eyes tells everyone to stop making fun of our protagonist. Hanmaru feels happy that she stood up for him, but she does so by reminding everyone that he used to hide in the bathroom before. That other episode was even more embarrassing, so it didn't help much. What bothers our protagonist the most is Captain Kang's indifference. He also hates being seen as incompetent in that place. So Hanmaru picks up his phone and considers calling Ildo. He decides to forget all the humiliations and start a new life at headquarters. At that moment, the alarm is triggered. Someone grabs Captain Kang's arm. Eden says that this time, he's going no matter what. Eden explains that he can't stand the boredom anymore. Surprisingly, he even invites Hanmaru to come along. Hanmaru feels a bit suspicious. Now in the mountains on a sunny day, the dynamic duo is there. Eden is actually quite excited at this moment. Hanmaru doesn't want to spend another second with that psychopath. Eden stops and says that things are about to get complicated. Hanmaru asks why. Eden mocks him, asking if he has a problem with his eyes and points toward the house. Hanmaru worries about the people who might be inside. Eden tells him to follow, but Hanmaru doesn't like taking orders from him. The two then open the gate and step inside. He comments that the dust inside is very thick and wonders if this is a level 4 demon. We see that it's just a normal house, and apparently, all the rooms are filled with yellow dust. The protagonist is very concerned about their safety inside the house, so he questions Eden about why he's being so careless. At that moment, the two stand in front of a door, and Eden says he needs to go inside, so he tries to open the door, but it's locked. Hanmaru is worried about what might be inside, but Eden just wants him to move aside. Eden wants to use his ability to unlock the door. He then says he's going to break it while also breaking one of his fingers. Hanmaru quickly steps away, and apparently, nothing happens. Hanmaru finds it amusing since Eden was acting all important just a moment ago. Trying to understand the situation, he looks through the keyhole. There's a lot of yellow dust and a strange noise coming from behind the door, and he can see a goblin-like creature. Hanmaru gets curious and also peeks through the keyhole. Then he asks why the creature locked itself inside since it looks weak. Eden tells him to pay attention because the dust density indicates a level 7 demon. The protagonist is startled, realizing that this monster could be even stronger than the level 5 demon. Eden confirms but seems quite excited, because finally he has a chance to fight a strong monster. However, Hanmaru, being more cautious, thinks about reporting it to headquarters, so he tries to leave the area by opening the door. But apparently, the door was locked and wouldn't budge at all. Hanmaru tries to force it open. Since the situation is getting very strange, he wonders if the demon locked inside might be behind this. Eden is still trying to break into the room where the monster is. Then he starts getting impatient, cursing the goblin demon, calling it a needy shut-in. Hanmaru doesn't want to stay trapped there with a maniac obsessed with demons, and besides him, a level 7 demon. So he keeps trying his best to get out of the place. The goblin demon is still standing there doing nothing. Then it starts repeating Eden's words, needy, and it seems like something is about to happen. The goblin demon's face begins to contort into a distorted expression. Eden is confused because, even after breaking all his fingers, the door remains intact. He wonders what kind of hellish material it's made of. Meanwhile, on the other side, the protagonist is desperately trying to get out of the house. He tries everything to create an exit, but he can't even break the glass window. Hanmaru wonders if the creature has an ability that's keeping them trapped. At that moment, he starts feeling pain in his chest. They've been stuck there for hours, and he starts having a panic attack. 2 hours pass, and the protagonist wonders if the other officers forgot about them. The scene shifts to the department. The sensei is furious about something. Four Eyes starts getting worried. The sensei is angry because she apparently forgot to schedule a training session in Busan, so they start rushing to prepare the documents. Captain Kang finishes the download, holds the USB drive, and hands the files to the sensei. The sensei thanks her and leaves. Everyone feels relieved once he's gone. Now they return to their usual activities, basically doing nothing. Suddenly, something clicks in their minds. The group finally remembers that the two who went after the demon still haven't returned. Then, they prepare to go after the two. Captain Kang also wants to go along because she feels something is wrong. But Four Eyes seems worried about something. Four Eyes questions whether it's really necessary for the captain to go. She replies not to worry and tells them to hurry. Back at the house where the creature was, the group of officers has already arrived and notices the two are missing. The girl with colored hair wonders what's going on. Just then, the two appear, shouting at them not to close the door. But it was too late. The door had already been shut. The two become desperate because of this. Four Eyes doesn't understand their reaction. Now they try to open the door. The two explain that the creature is inside and won't come out no matter what. The captain tells everyone to step back. She then prepares and activates her ability. The captain takes position. She unleashes a slashing attack toward the door, but the door remained intact even after that attack. The girl with colored hair is impressed by this. Four Eyes tells the captain to step aside. It's her turn now. For the first time, we're about to see Four Eyes' ability. A spider-like creature emerges from her arm. It's a rather interesting ability called Demonic Spider. She then instructs her little one to go. The tiny spider struggles to do something, but apparently it doesn't work, and she comforts her spider. Our protagonist finds the scene bizarre. Eden takes the opportunity to see what the girl with colored hair is capable of, but she explains that she doesn't have any offensive abilities. The protagonist comments that she's useless then. The girl with colored hair gets extremely irritated and tells him to do something instead. The protagonist says that the mirror ability is useless if he can't see the creature properly. Eden asks if there's anyone else in the department who could save them right now. Four Eyes says that the sensei went to a training area, so he won't be back anytime soon. The girl with colored hair mentions that there's still the guy who takes care of the plants, but in reality, he was already there with the group. He comments that he entered the house because they were taking too long to come out. Everyone is impressed by his ability to conceal his presence. The plant guy then peeks through the keyhole. Four Eyes asks if he can do anything about the situation, and suddenly he lies down on the floor. Everyone is completely baffled. The protagonist asks if he's actually sleeping. Four Eyes says she has no idea because she never had the chance to witness Kim's abilities. This discourages the dynamic duo, because now the entire group of officers who came to rescue them is also trapped with them. Suddenly, Four Eyes calls for everyone's attention. She asks everyone to work together to find a way out. Eden insists that it's impossible, but she retorts that even so, they can't just sit around doing nothing. The girl with colored hair says it's best to wait for the sensei to return. The protagonist doesn't want to be stuck in a house with a demon until the next day. The group is now at an impasse. At this moment, Hanmaru turns his attention to the officer, and Kang was strangely silent. The girl with colored hair finds the monster's inactivity odd. Suddenly, something happens. At that moment, Kang starts running, but she suddenly stops for some reason. Then, a loud noise is heard, and the space inside the house begins to shift. The walls start closing in. The entire house begins to rearrange itself. Eden now understands the demon's purpose. Its true intent is now clear to him, because the monster inside, which at first seemed idle, had actually been preparing for something all along. Its goal was to make the house disappear, except for the area where the monster was. So its intention is to erase the house and be the only thing left inside. The protagonist realizes, if they don't kill the monster, they'll end up being crushed. Meanwhile, the house continues to shift and rearrange. Hanmaru starts getting anxious. 4 years ago, Captain Kang visits her grandmother. A child is happy to see her and calls her Shanna. The grandmother welcomes her and asks her to come inside quickly. That night she stayed there, and the boy was very happy to have her company. Then she notices something. It was a drawing on the wall, and she worries that the grandmother might get mad. But the boy says that's not the case. The grandmother saw it and thought the drawing was really cool, because it was a drawing of their family, and now we see the drawing. Returning to the present, Kang starts feeling extremely worried about something. She rushes forward, preparing to use her ability. Her blade begins to manifest. She drives the blade into the wall joint. Kang is putting in all her strength. She tries in every way to cut through the wall, but the blade is giving in. She tries to reinforce the fissures in the blade with more blood. Kang is not going to give up anytime soon, so she gives it her all. Meanwhile, Four Eyes starts to grow concerned. At that moment, our protagonist doesn't just stand still. He tries to stop the captain. At that moment, the blade shatters. But strangely, for some reason, Kang looks deeply saddened. In the reflection of her eyes, the drawing from that memory is visible. And apparently, that same drawing made by the boy was on that very wall. The two were barely able to avoid being caught by the shifting wall. It had stopped moving for now. Kang appears to be unconscious. Four Eyes checks on her. It seems she passed out from excessive blood loss. But it was very strange for her to have pushed herself so hard. However, Four Eyes knows something. And apparently, that house was actually her grandmother's house. Kang lost both her grandmother and her younger brother to a demon. She was the only survivor gaining the demon's abilities. As Hanmaru looks at Captain Kang, he begins to understand. And the girl with colored hair is relieved that the house has stopped moving. But Four Eyes tells them to hurry up and do something. And here she mentions a saying, "Constant dripping wears away the stone." It was already nighttime, and they began to focus their efforts on the spot where Kang had attacked. But it was taking too long. Everyone was already exhausted, and the protagonist was resting. Suddenly, Eden asks them to switch turns, but the protagonist complains that he's too tired and hungry. At that moment, Kane picks up the knife. She says that this time, she'll do it, but the protagonist tells her to rest. However, she insists that she's fine. Then she begins working again. At that moment, he tries to start a conversation by commenting about her grandmother's house and how well maintained it looked. Kang explains that the house is well kept because it's waiting. So the protagonist asks what it's waiting for, and she replies, "For the demon that killed my family. One day, it will return." He then questions how she knows the demon will come back there. Remembering what happened that day, she answers that the demon was different from the others. And now we see the appearance of that abomination. Captain Kang continues her explanation. She talks about the memories from that day, and about the humanoid creature she remembers so vividly. Here we see another creature, one that looks more like a man, and Kang comments that the creature seemed abnormally intelligent and had a purpose. Because that creature was so unique, Kang was certain it would return one day. Now the protagonist begins to understand everything and the reason why Kang is in the rookie department despite being a level 7 ability user. Captain Kang asks if he's disappointed by this fact, and he replies that he's not, because his reason for being in the department is even worse. He's only there for the salary. Then she comments that he'll be going to headquarters soon since the salary there is better, and Hanmaru is surprised that she knows this information. Kang explains that she knows because she was in the forest that day. Our protagonist explains that he hasn't confirmed his transfer yet, and she says it's fine if he decides to go, and she continues talking about the matter, when suddenly they hear a loud crash. Everyone immediately goes on high alert. The group starts positioning themselves. The house is still shifting. The protagonist wanted to keep listening to what Kang had to say, as it seemed to be something about him. Finally, morning had arrived. Apparently, the house had stopped moving. The only person they could turn to at that moment was the sensei, but he should have already returned from the training area by now. Here, we see that the plant guy is still sleeping. The protagonist is intrigued by him. It didn't make much sense for the man to still be asleep. Once again, the group hears a noise. The protagonist says they need to wake up the plant guy, and suddenly, he's standing, looking bizarre. He comments that now might be a good time. The door where the creature was suddenly opens. The goblin demon rushes out, with those strange things from the plant guy attached to its head. Everyone is in shock, wanting to know what exactly his ability does. He explains that his demonic spore molding ability takes a long time to set up, which is why he usually doesn't use it. Everyone there congratulates him. Eden tells them to leave the small talk for another day. The monster was finally in front of them, but it was possible to see some hands coming out of the door behind it. There were more goblins at that door. The goblins then turned their attention to the group, and they start advancing. The protagonist doesn't understand how that creature has more than one ability. The demon goblins then launch their attack. Our group gets ready. Kang asks Yozak to hide the group members. The one with colored hair starts forming a barrier, and that was her demonic ability, Zero Presence. Captain Kang charges at the creature. She easily slices one of the demonic goblins, but she ends up hitting the wall. The place is too narrow for a sword fight. Captain Kang gets nervous as another goblin rushes at her, but before the goblin reaches her, something happens. Our protagonist lunges at the creature with a bite. The goblin monster screams in pain. Apparently, the attack was effective, but the goblin is not defeated yet. The demonic goblin tries to use its ability. It's trying to bring the ceiling down. At that moment, the protagonist gets worried, so he tries to use the mirror ability, which creates a rather bizarre scene. Despite that, the one with colored hair praises him. Our protagonist stopped the ceiling, but the horde of goblins continues the attack. Eden then takes action and asks our protagonist not to get in the way. At that moment, Hanmaru tells him to pay attention. Eden gets attacked from behind. He was surrounded by goblins. At that moment, the goblins start getting hit by something. Then, a giant spider becomes visible in the area, and it was Four Eyes' ability. Everyone seems to be doing their part well. Kang keeps slicing the goblins, a true battle against the demons. Two level 7 ability users fighting while the rest of the group just watches from behind. They've been holding their arms up for a long time, so they start feeling awkward at that moment. Four Eyes detects something. It looks like she sees another horde of goblins approaching. She wonders why the goblins keep coming from that door. At that moment, the protagonist gets an idea. He rushes to do something. He wants to enter the door where the goblins are coming from. The two frontliners prepare themselves. They start clearing a path for Hanmaru. The protagonist jumps into that room. The yellow dust inside was very dense. At that moment, he notices something. There's a horde of goblins staring at something. And there in the center was what seemed to be the original goblin. The goblin never left that room and let its clones do all the work until now. The creature keeps replicating itself. The protagonist prepares to act. The room starts rearranging itself. Then he uses the ability he managed to copy. The ceiling starts coming down at that moment. Hanmaru rushes out to avoid getting crushed, along with the goblins, and the door is right ahead. He needs to hurry, because the ceiling was already at door level. His friends try to help him escape that doomed room. Hanmaru then makes a jump, managing to grab his companion's hand. Eden quickly pulls him out, right at the last moment as the room collapsed. It was really close. The group then celebrates, and everyone finally starts praising our protagonist's ability. Kang, as always, remains indifferent. She then glances at the house and starts remembering her past with her family. At that moment, the protagonist gets a little worried about her. It's no longer possible to copy the creature's ability since it's dead, but he thinks of doing something else. Out of nowhere, he starts eating the creature. Swallowed it all without hesitation. Using the remaining yellow dust in the area, he gets to work. The house starts moving. He is restoring all the lost spaces. Everyone is impressed at that moment. The protagonist keeps working, but he was already at his limit due to the small amount of yellow dust. Kang notices that he's pushing himself too hard. She thanks him but asks him to stop. Apparently, she is at peace. We see the state in which the house was left. Unfortunately, our protagonist at least managed to recover Kang's brother's drawing. Back at the environmental department, finally, the sensei showed up. After the training area, he had stopped by the festival in Busan. But when he arrived at the department, there was no one there. So the sensei starts wondering where everyone is. As he goes to open a door, his phone starts ringing. He answers the call, and on the other end of the line was Ildo. He mentions that Hanmaru rejected a position at HQ and wants to know if there's any reason for that. The two then start discussing the matter. The scene cuts to where our group was sleeping. They were exhausted after all. They had gone 2 days without sleep. Some time passes, and then something happens. The protagonist is struck and wounded by a slashing attack. We don't quite understand what happened here, so we go back 7 hours. At this point, the protagonist is complaining, saying he didn't expect to stay at work for so long. A good amount of time had passed, and he was still tired from fighting that demon. The protagonist hears a noise and looks back. A car then appears beside him. Inside the car was Eden. The protagonist remembers that Eden helped him before, so he takes advantage of their good moment and asks for a ride. But Eden gets annoyed and tells the protagonist to go shake his ass for 30 minutes. Then he just speeds off, leaving the protagonist behind. The one with colored hair is there and is impressed that Eden has an imported car. The two then start talking about Eden's rotten personality. She comments that wealth and beauty mean nothing if your personality is awful, but in truth they were just jealous of him, and they both laugh about it. At the environmental department, the two arrive there in the morning, and their sensei welcomes the protagonist, this time very cheerfully, calling him a level 7 ability user, but the protagonist has no idea what's going on. Four Eyes explains that because he ate the level 7 monster, he is now a level 7 user as well. Sensei, out of nowhere, starts treating a protagonist really well, though that wasn't the case before. The protagonist finds it nice to finally be recognized. The one with colored hair is impressed by the protagonist's gluttony ability. Someone there starts getting annoyed. Eden tells everyone to shut up. The protagonist doesn't understand why he suddenly got so irritated. Hanmaru thought Eden only hated him because he was a level 1 ability user, but that wasn't the case. Captain Kang calls Hanmaru for a conversation. Outside, the protagonist wonders what Kang wants with him. She then starts talking, thanking him for what he did at her grandmother's house. Hanmaru says it was a team effort, so it was nothing. She continues, saying that now she understands her feelings toward the protagonist. It almost seems like she's confessing. Continuing, she says she doesn't think he's really a level 1 ability user. Hanmaru asks her to explain. Kang says it doesn't make sense for his ability to be level 1 since he can consume demon abilities. The protagonist starts questioning whether that bamboo demon was really the original owner of the gluttony ability. Kang believes he must have encountered a demon before that one. The protagonist is struggling to remember any other demon he might have met. Behind Kang, something strange is happening. Right behind the wall, something seems to be approaching. The The protagonist feels something at that moment. A part of a demon becomes visible. And indeed, there was a sinister creature right there. A monster he once saw in his hallucinations. The protagonist suddenly feels tightness in his chest. He thinks he started hallucinating again. Kang notices that the protagonist isn't well. The protagonist explains that he started hallucinating again. Kang then holds his hand. She tries to calm him down at that moment. The protagonist feels a bit awkward, and she starts thinking that there's probably something about his past. At that moment, Sensei arrives and assumes the two are getting together. They are caught off guard. Kang tells Sensei that would never happen. That hit Hanmaru hard. He really felt rejected there. Then she just walks away. Sensei starts teasing the protagonist. Hanmaru doesn't understand why that rejection affected him so much. Some time passes. Four Eyes says they need to check the yellow dust alarm. The scene shifts to a mountain. Kang and the protagonist are climbing the mountain. The protagonist is still bothered by what happened earlier. The two stop in front of a device. Kang starts taking notes on the device's data, and the protagonist is still thinking about the rejection. Meanwhile, Captain Kang is completely focused on her work. Suddenly, the phone starts ringing. Kang immediately picks it up. On the other end of the line was Yoshioki, the one with colored hair. She is badly injured, asking for help. Captain Kang becomes extremely worried at that moment. The protagonist tries to understand the situation. He is surprised to learn that Sensei is a level 7 ability user and was captured by a demon. But now the demon was coming their way. The two remain alert as the demon was strong enough to defeat a level 10 ability user. In the center of the yellow dust, the demon's silhouette could be seen. The two prepare for battle. The beast has a rather peculiar appearance, with a hole in the middle of its head. The creature suddenly speaks to them, catching them off guard. The monster wasn't miming, it was actually speaking. Surprisingly, the demon was introducing itself and asking to have a conversation. The protagonist is astonished by this. Officer Kane tries to grasp the situation. The creature claims to have no hostile intentions and only wants to talk. The two then ask what the demon wants to discuss. The one with colored hair had warned Kane to be careful with what she said, so she tells Hanmaru to do the same, but he thinks this is an opportunity to learn more about demons. The protagonist asks where the creature is from. The monster responds that it came from a place called Naraka. Then he asks where that place is. The monster replies that it is the center of hell, a place where the condemned who have committed sins end up. After they die, they are forced to fight in that place for all eternity. The protagonist doesn't believe what he's hearing, but the creature confirms that demons were once human. The protagonist is shocked. Even Captain Kang is surprised. The protagonist is in disbelief that those demons he fought before were once human, and he begins to remember all the times he ate those demons. This really unsettles Hanmaru. He can't hold it in and vomits. Now the demon asks to pose a question. At that moment, Hanmaru is intrigued. Meanwhile, Kang grabs his arm. She asks him to stop talking to the creature, saying that even if they seem friendly, they are the same demons that attacked Sensei and the one with colored hair. Kang then prepares for battle, but the creature insists that it doesn't want to fight. Kang ignores the monster and charges forward. She is about to exterminate the demon. The creature says that killing it won't bring her brother back. The fact that the creature knew this caught Kang off guard. She stops the attack immediately. The creature continues speaking, saying that the boy's death was her fault. Captain Kang is shaken by this. Then she remembers the day her brother died. Apparently, he was protecting her, telling her to save herself. It was truly a tragic day. Kang was powerless in that situation. With her lifeless brother in her arms, there was nothing she could do. All she could do was cry in despair. Kang cannot pull herself together. The creature continues provoking her, saying she was supposed to protect him, not the other way around. Our protagonist tries to help her at that moment. Captain Kang had been wounded. She was stabbed straight in the heart, but nothing visible had struck her. The demon tells Hanmaru to leave the girl behind and continue their conversation. The protagonist refuses at that moment. He is furious about what was done to Kang. The protagonist then punches the creature. The demon falls to the ground. Hanmaru keeps attacking the creature. The monster tries to provoke him, saying that he was rejected by that woman. The protagonist is apparently affected by these words, and that makes him vulnerable to the demon's ability. The protagonist doesn't agree with what the creature said because he was never actually rejected. He just felt rejected. He never even considered being her romantic partner. Kang still seems to be alive and apologizes for some reason. The protagonist stands there, watching. He is still feeling the effects of the creature's attack. Hanmaru starts coughing up a lot of blood. The demon continues speaking, saying that emotions make people weak, and that it has never felt emotions, even when it was human. The creature is annoyed at not getting a response. The protagonist begins analyzing the monster's ability, which is effective against emotions. The creature, holding a rock, prepares to finish off our protagonist. Hanmaru thinks this is the end, and all he wants at that moment is for some heartless bastard to show up and save them. The creature is about to smash the rock into the protagonist's head, but suddenly, the demon's body parts start twisting. The heartless bastard had arrived. Eden arrives, mocking our protagonist. This time, Hanmaru is happy to see him. Eden feels uneasy about the protagonist's happiness. The creature apparently isn't dead yet, and that catches Eden's attention. The demon was still intact. The demon starts insulting them, calling them low-level, and the dynamic duo gets really annoyed by that. Then, the monster stands in front of our dynamic duo. The protagonist warns Eden that the demon can read minds. Eden says he doesn't need tips from a noob. The protagonist thinks he's even worse than the demon. Eden prepares for combat. He then breaks one of his fingers, which immediately affects the creature. The creature starts provoking him, bringing up his father. Eden just ignores it and continues using his ability. The demon takes all the attacks at that moment. The demon says that he must be a person without emotions, like himself, and the creature keeps bringing up disturbing topics, like the episode when his mother took her own life. Eden then remembers that episode. The protagonist didn't expect Eden to have such a horrible past. He seemed like just a spoiled rich kid. Hanmaru thinks the demon has gone too far now, and that Eden is about to be affected by the psychological attack. But for now, they're still at a standstill. Eden doesn't seem to be affected yet. He just says he's not responsible for his mother's death and charges at the creature, commenting that she was weak, and that's why she did what she did. The creature then tries to find other things to affect Eden. It says that he won't survive the end times like Hanmaru because he's weaker than the protagonist. Eden suddenly stops for some reason. Possibly he's been affected, and it looks like the creature finally found Eden's weak spot. But just as Eden is about to be hit by the attack, someone intervenes. Our protagonist seems to have figured out how the creature's ability works. The demon used abilities to distract its victims and then stab them using its tongue. Captain Kang appears to help. The creature's tongue gets cut off. Kang asks if they're okay. She looks as stunning as always. Our protagonist is mesmerized by her beauty, but he tries to regain his focus. As for Eden, he wasn't hit by the creature's blade, but the demon's last words affected him a lot. The demon says that Hanmaru is stronger than him, and that shook Eden. Hanmaru doesn't understand why he got so affected by that, but he kind of enjoys the fact that Eden is feeling a bit jealous of him. The protagonist tries to cheer Eden up. He even compliments him to see if he'll snap out of it. We see if it worked or not. It actually worked, and Eden is back to normal. The group then refocuses on the battle. The protagonist asks how they're going to deal with that blade tongue. Kang says he just needs to back off since the demon can't talk anymore, as its tongue was cut off. But her condition isn't good right now. She realizes her wounds aren't healing. Apparently, the cause is the psychological effect the creature had on her. The protagonist tries to think of a solution at that moment. He then draws the creature's attention. The demon wastes no time and rushes toward the protagonist. Our protagonist asks Eden to take care of Captain Kang for now. The protagonist thinks about using the goblin ability he gained in the last battle. Kang asks Eden to help Hanmaru. Our protagonist keeps running, and the creature chases after him. Hanmaru is trying to find a building or something similar, but he can't see anything like that in the forest, no matter how much he looks. Now he starts getting worried. On the other side of the fence, a car was passing by, and inside the car was Eden. He calls the protagonist over to the car. Hanmaru can't believe Eden would risk destroying such an expensive car. The protagonist thinks it must be really nice to be rich. Hanmaru is about to jump into the car. Finally, he's inside the car. The monster was coming right behind, heading straight toward the car. Hanmaru tries to lure it over there. The creature then jumps into the car. Quickly, Eden shuts the door and gives the signal to Hanmaru. Hanmaru quickly exits through the other side of the car. It looks like their plan is working, but suddenly, something happens. The protagonist gets hit head-on by the slashing attack. The demon was right there, behind him, but behind the demon was... someone had surprised the creature. Behind the demon was the protagonist again, and inside the car, it was full of Hanmaru clones. Perfect copies, even the wound was replicated. They were using their multiple clones. Hanmaru grabs the demon and begins devouring it in a terrifying scene. Hanmaru continues attacking the demon in every possible way. It's the most bizarre fight you'll see today. Our protagonist is going all out on the creature inside the car, and Eden starts getting worried because the protagonist has been in there for too long. Kang arrives at the scene and asks what's going on. The demon keeps talking, trying to trick Hanmaru, asking if the protagonist inherited all this violence from his father. Then he starts remembering his childhood. It seems he suffered at the hands of his father. In this scene, he is being lifted by his father, who tells him to stop crying. Then the creature keeps provoking him, using that episode from his life. The protagonist tries to ignore what the demon is saying. Hanmaru's ear gets injured, and he gets really angry at what the demon is doing. But the beast just smiles at that moment and prepares a new attack. The protagonist says that the demon's attack won't affect him if he can't hear. Hanmaru then keeps attacking. He prepares to use another mode of his goblin ability, and suddenly, the car is crushed. Captain Kang becomes extremely worried at that moment. Eden, cold and calculating, tries to keep her under control. The two then watch as the car is destroyed. Blood flies everywhere. The yellow dust begins to dissipate, indicating that the monster is dead. The two then go to check on the car, which was completely wrecked and destroyed. The captain rushes to try to help Maru. Eden says there's no way he could have survived that. The captain thinks they can use the remaining yellow dust to heal him. She is extremely angry because our protagonist attacked himself while attacking the creature. Eden just observes the situation, but then he decides to help. He also thinks it was a terrible idea for the protagonist to crush his own body along with the demons. The scene shifts to a dark place where someone is floating. Apparently, it's our protagonist. He is wondering why he can't feel his own body, and he asks himself if he managed to get rid of that bastard demon. But our protagonist was curious about what the demon was trying to say at the end. Something about the abyss. The demon was saying that the abyss was calling him, but our protagonist didn't understand what the demon meant by that. Suddenly, our protagonist heard a voice telling him to wake up. Then he wakes up startled, but the situation is still very strange. Something was coming out of his shirt. At that moment, a hand emerges from his stomach. Out of nowhere, an entire demon comes out from inside him. It looked like a horrifying hallucination. This was already the fourth time our protagonist had a vision of the same demon. That terrifying demon with a canine form. The creature asks Maru if he remembers it. Our protagonist doesn't respond, too terrified. But even so, he starts having a memory at that moment. He remembers the creature. It was the same demon from when he was little. Maru was with his father and wanted to get out of there at any cost. But for some reason, his father stopped him from running away and got angry at him. And Maru's father's motivation was to make his son start fighting against these monsters. But little Maru, at that moment, didn't understand why they had to fight against those demons. Then his father, very coldly, explains that they need to obtain that bastard demon's unique ability at any cost. Then his father says they need to go to the abyss, throwing little Maru toward the creature. At that moment, he thought it was the end for him, and the monster, without hesitation, lunges at him, back to where the car was crushed. Eden tries to use his abilities to pry open the car's wreckage. Somehow he manages to do it. Inside the car, incredibly, the protagonist was still there. The two are shocked by the sight. The protagonist was wrecked, and there was no more yellow dust left to heal him. The situation seemed really dire. Captain Kang checks if he is still breathing, and apparently he was still alive. Eden can't believe he's still breathing, and it looks like our protagonist, just like the demons, created his own yellow dust and used it to completely recover. It almost seemed like our protagonist was using a cheat code. The two are stunned by Maru's recovery, but it seems he was at his limit. The protagonist collapses to the ground. The two stand there, not understanding much of what just happened. Eden starts hitting the protagonist, demanding to know his true identity. The protagonist asks what he means. Eden says that he just produced yellow dust, just like the demons, and asks if that's also an ability that comes with gluttony. But the protagonist is thinking about the memory he recently recovered. He acquired the gluttony ability a long time ago, when he was a child, not recently. This happened because his father forced the situation, so he wonders why his father would do something like that. Maru regains his senses. Meanwhile, Eden is impatiently waiting for answers, but Maru is still recovering from the shock. Kane tells him to leave him alone, as he might be having a panic attack right now, and she says they should keep today's events a secret. Eden doesn't like the idea of hiding the protagonist's monstrous abilities. Kang counters, saying they still don't know why he was emitting yellow dust. Eden is still worried, afraid that he might turn into something like a demon. But with conviction, Kang says she trusts Maru. The two seem to have ended the conversation at that moment. Eden says whatever then. Meanwhile, the protagonist is still on the ground, writhing in pain. The captain rethinks what she just said. The scene shifts to a moving train. Maru is inside the carriage, apparently feeling nauseous. The protagonist is deep in thought about what happened, afraid he might turn into a monster. At that moment, he even starts hallucinating. He is startled by the vision. The one with colored hair tells him to stop acting schizophrenic. He says he got scared because he saw that thing. Maru, taking the opportunity, says he wants to ask her something, but she abruptly rejects him, thinking he was going to ask her out. The protagonist is shocked. At that moment, her acquaintance was calling, asking to meet up. The scene shifts to a store. There they are discussing a department transfer. But before continuing the conversation, her friend wants to know who the person with her is. And it seems Maru wasn't supposed to be there. He followed her for some reason. Maru says he just didn't want to be alone, so he came along. The chubby guy is also an officer from another team, and Maru finds him interesting. And apparently, the chubby guy wants to lead his team because of internal conflicts. The one with colored hair explains that it's a case of bullying. The protagonist can't believe there are officers who engage in bullying. She says the problem is that the chubby guy doesn't know how to stand up for himself. And the chubby guy says she used to be part of that team of bullies. The protagonist asks what kind of human garbage is in that team. Yoshioki replies that they are people with wicked hearts. At that moment, she starts remembering those people. Calling the members of that group wicked humans caught the protagonist's attention. She says that among the officers there are many wicked people who are even more dangerous than demons. Then he recalls Eden's concerns about him, fearing he might become a demon. Hanmaru wonders if he has already become more dangerous than a demon. The scene cuts to the group leaving. The protagonist ended up having to carry the chubby guy, but fortunately, they arrived at the chubby guy's parents' house. She tells them to leave him there and go, but the one with colored hair suddenly gets scared by something. There were people inside the house, and she becomes genuinely worried. When she tries to turn back and leave, a red-haired guy blocks the entrance. Out of nowhere, he kicks her hard. The group was clearly there to cause trouble. The red-haired guy is furious because the chubby guy requested a transfer. The protagonist tries to stop him at that moment. He asks who he is. The protagonist replies that he is part of Yoshioki's team, and the red-haired guy comments that their team is where all the weaklings end up. Then the protagonist takes a punch straight to the face. He gets sent flying along with the chubby guy. The protagonist is apparently unconscious. Meanwhile, the one with colored hair keeps getting beaten. The red-haired guy has no mercy for her and shows contempt for the weak. The protagonist starts recovering, and suddenly he begins exhaling yellow dust. Still at the chubby guy's parents' house, the protagonist is apparently nervous. The red-haired guy is furious because the one with colored hair also reported his group before leaving the team. Since then, they had been looking for her to keep an eye on her. They mock her, saying they never expected her to be hiding in the weakest team of all. The protagonist stands nearby with a sinister expression. Then we hear a noise. The red-haired guy stops for a moment to see what it is, when suddenly, he takes a brutal kick straight to the nose, and he goes flying far away. His friends are in shock, asking who did that. Then Eden appears, introducing himself as a member of the weakest team of all. Eden tries to get the protagonist's attention, but he seems a bit distant. Eden tells him to stay sharp or he'll end up dead. The protagonist is curious about why Eden is there. Eden explains that he had been following him to see if they would cause trouble. Since back on the train, Captain Kang was also on that train. She finds it strange that Eden was there. After all, he doesn't seem to care about anyone in this world. So Officer Kane also came along. She rushes to help Yoshioki, and she is absolutely furious about what they did to her. Another woman from that group says they can't leave now since they hit one of her teammates. It looks like they really want trouble. Kang asks if they want to be disciplined for causing problems for other officers. The other woman snaps back, saying they are the ones who will be disciplined. At that moment, the red-haired guy wakes up bloodthirsty. Without thinking, he rushes at Eden. For some reason, Eden looks excited. A full-blown gang war is about to break out. The protagonist runs to help Eden, but the captain tells him not to move. Strangely, she tells him not to transform and to be careful. Kang then looks to the side and sees a broom. She thinks of something at that moment. It was 2 against 1, so Eden ends up being restrained. When the red-haired guy charges at him with a chair, just as Eden is about to be hit, something strikes the bully right in the ribs. It was Kang with her broom. Continuing her attack, Kang breaks the broom against the other guy's shin, and she tells them not to move unless they want more of a beating. Suddenly, a guy with a relaxed appearance appears, asking why they are fighting civilians. Captain Kang asks him to identify himself, and apparently he was the leader of the bullying group. Kang then introduces herself as a member of the gangway team and says they need to have a talk. She explains that one of their members was attacked by a member of his team, and says they need to be held accountable for it. But out of nowhere, she takes a punch straight to the face. Kang goes flying. The man says he's irritated because someone who isn't a civilian hit his kids. Then he notices the one with colored hair standing nearby. He greets her with a cynical smile. Kang is still unconscious on the ground. Meanwhile, the protagonist exhaling yellow dust. It looks like she took a critical hit, and our protagonist is furious because of it. Eden notices what's happening with Hanmaru and tells him to calm down, but the protagonist disappears from in front of him at that moment and charges at the leader of the other team. The man is caught off guard and gets punched square in the face. The blow is brutal, and the man is sent flying far away. This one got what he deserved. The protagonist keeps exhaling yellow dust. Meanwhile, the other team is in disbelief at what they're witnessing. Eden holds his head, and the one with colored hair says the situation just got complicated. The protagonist seems to have returned to normal and is trying to help the captain. She tells him he shouldn't act recklessly, or he'll end up spreading yellow dust. The protagonist apologizes and says he couldn't control himself. Suddenly, the leader of the other group starts laughing hysterically. He is using the yellow dust the protagonist produced to heal himself. The man is very impressed that someone can produce yellow dust without being a demon. Then he tries to get more information from the protagonist. The leader of the other group even tries to recruit him, but the protagonist remembers his companion saying that only trash is in that group. Hanmaru rejects him immediately. The man is disappointed by this response. and he says that now he can't just let the protagonist walk away. At this point, yellow dust could be seen everywhere, enough to activate demonic abilities. Then, the man proposes a fight club between officers. The protagonist thinks this man must have crap in his head, and that his team is full of psychopaths. Still at the chubby guy's residence, the man pulls a green card from a container and asks everyone to line up. Kang says this isn't right, but the guy interrupts her and starts explaining the rules. Whoever wins the 3-3 gets to take Yoseok, and if the protagonist's team wins, they must forget what Yoseok did to them. Then he turns to the protagonist, calling him a human demon. The protagonist doesn't like that one bit. The man says HU won't stay quiet if they find out he produces yellow dust, but he promises to keep it a secret if the protagonist participates in the fight. Kang wonders if all leaders are like this. Eden considers taking him out. The captain says that won't work because the other team will step in. The man tells them to think of this situation as an interclass tournament, where the first to surrender loses, but no deaths, because that would be inhumane. Our group can't believe what they're hearing. Eden takes off his cap at that moment and says he'll take advantage of this opportunity since he's always wanted to fight a demon with demonic abilities. Maru calls him crazy, but the captain buys into Eden's idea. However, she tells him to stall for time while fighting. The two don't understand why. She simply says they'll find out soon and asks who will go first. Eden wants to go first as expected. On the Troublemaker's team, the man asks who will face Eden. And here, we finally have our matchup. The guy's demonic ability seems to be related to his eye. In the background, a demon's silhouette can be seen. While looking at Eden, the guy can immediately decipher his ability. At this moment, the matchup changes to one the Troublemakers find more interesting. The red-haired guy charges in with his demonic ability. He must want revenge for the kick he took straight to the face. Eden still does nothing. Finally, he breaks one of his fingers, dismantling the opponent's attack with apparent ease. But his enemy says it's not over yet. He can still control the roots that were severed from his body. Eden was being restrained at that moment. And finally, he is completely covered by roots while his opponent mocks him. Asking if Eden is going to surrender, the bully prepares to continue attacking. Eden says of course not, he won't surrender to a primate and still has something left to break. Eden's tooth grinds at that moment, and he finally manages to free himself from the root prison, leaving the bully stunned. Eden grabs his opponent by the neck and threatens to break all 50 of his vertebrae. Then he gets to work. The bully loses movement in his legs. Eden tells him not to pass out yet, because next comes the neck fracture. The bully is terrified at that moment. Kang then decides to stop the fight there. She says he could end up killing his opponent like this. So the captain announces the end of the round with Eden's victory. The bully, after his defeat, is still writhing in pain. His leader stands there, analyzing the situation. But soon he calls for the next round. Kang gets ready while complaining that Eden failed to stall for more time. Then she asks who her opponent will be, and the guy with the demon eye, just like before, reads Kang's ability. The Troublemaker's group says the matchup is perfect for the woman who was with them, so the girl gets ready. She rips out 2 of her own ribs, using them like daggers, and that was her demonic ability, Bone Knife. Kang tries to convince her opponent not to use blades, as there could be casualties, but her opponent completely ignores her, saying she doesn't care while assuming a terrifying combat stance. The Bone Girl then charges in. Kang has to think fast at this moment, but fortunately, she manages to activate her ability in time. The bone attack is completely blocked by her blood sword, but her opponent doesn't give up. One of the bones strikes Kang's blind spot. She realizes that this situation can't go on, so Kang deflects her opponent's attack and then prepares to counterattack, but her opponent keeps up the assault. Kang dodges for now and says she needs to defeat her without hurting her too much. But the captain's attack appears to have been brutal. The Bone Girl's teammate is worried, and her team helps her at that moment. Even Kang is concerned about her opponent. Eden mocks her, saying Kang didn't manage to buy any time in this fight either. She makes an excuse, saying she has never fought against humans, and she feels a bit awkward at that moment. The guy doesn't understand anything since the gangway team is known for only having weaklings. The leader then says that only Han Maru's fight is left. Kang says they've already won 2 rounds, so there's no reason for a third one. The leader admits that he created this situation just to witness Han Maru's abilities, and he even says this is a major event, wanting to make this fight worth 3 points. Kang tries to intervene in the absurdity, but Han Maru says it's fine. However, our protagonist wants to fight the leader himself. His team is shocked by his stupidity. The leader is delighted by what he just heard. The guy with the demon eye tries to analyze the protagonist's ability at that moment. Something catches his attention. Like before, a demon's silhouette can be seen, but something abnormal happens at that moment. The guy then wonders if our protagonist is really human, and he wants to know who he truly is. The leader says that fighting against the competition's judge would be cheating, and he proposes a fight against the strongest member of his team instead. Then, the chubby guy appears. He is very worried about his parents, but the leader reassures him and orders the protagonist to fight his strongest member. Yoseok finds the situation absurd. The leader just tells her to shut up. The leader promises to let the chubby guy transfer if he wins this fight. The protagonist doesn't quite understand the situation. Then he notices something strange. The demonic ability of the demon he ate earlier is allowing the protagonist to sense his opponent's frustrations. He could access his memories. With all the difficult situations the chubby guy had experienced, the protagonist is shocked at that moment. He avoids using that demonic ability, but he can't hold back and says that the chubby guy wished Yoseok had been bullied instead of him. The chubby guy is caught off guard by this. Continuing, the protagonist says that he thought he was lucky not to be in her place. The chubby guy yells at him to stop, when suddenly he is struck by the demon's tongue. The protagonist rushes to help the chubby guy, who remains on the ground, apologizing. Something didn't feel right at that moment. At that moment, the chubby guy uses his demonic ability, Deadly Poison. The protagonist is hit head-on, and our group becomes worried. The leader doesn't want interference and says the round isn't over yet. He walks over to the protagonist and asks if it hurts a lot. The deadly poison will melt even his organs, but the protagonist says he hasn't given up yet. The leader tells him to stop wasting time and show more of his abilities. The protagonist needs to attack the chubby guy if he wants to win. The protagonist says he doesn't care about the rules, and states that he will take down the leader right then and there. At that moment, the leader responds that this cannot happen. Rules must always be followed. The leader appears to be activating his ability and then speaks 8 times. The protagonist seems to be affected by something, and he collapses at that moment. The leader's attack also affects the rest of the group. Everyone in the area is affected. Eden wonders how this ability works while struggling to breathe. Yoseok seems to have witnessed this ability before and knows how to handle it. She instructs the rest of the group on how to react, and says that this is the leader's level 9 demonic ability. He appears to be enjoying the view and having fun with the situation. The leader is impressed by the speed of the protagonist's regeneration, so he wants to test him by increasing the gravity only for the protagonist. This begins to affect Hanmaru's internal organs. He starts coughing up a lot of blood. The leader notices that the more pain Hanmaru feels, the denser the yellow dust becomes. He concludes that the demon from which the protagonist got this ability must be very special. The protagonist then thinks about it, and remembers that the demon in question had inverted eyes compared to the others. But he tries to focus on what is happening now. Hanmaru wants to try using the demonic linguistic ability, but for some reason he can't read anything about the leader. The protagonist worries that the leader might be immune to this ability, and concludes that this person must be a psychopath. The leader pulls out a knife at that moment. He threatens to dissect our protagonist to discover the origin of the yellow dust. Then he positions the blade on the protagonist's neck, which is suddenly broken. Eden had managed to do it. The captain rushes to take action. She activates her ability, making a tremendous effort to stay on her feet. Kang charges at the leader, just as she was about to reach him. The leader increases the gravity level to 20 times. Kang is affected immediately, as well as the rest of the group. The situation seems desperate. The leader says that if he increases the gravity even more, they will pass out from a lack of oxygen to the brain. The protagonist calls out to Kang. While the leader grabs his blood blade, he says that now there will be no more interference. The situation remains complicated for our protagonist. The protagonist is nearly passing out due to the gravity, but then we hear a noise. The leader wonders who it could be, and tells whoever it is that the store is closed for the day. Someone remains standing at the entrance of the store. The door then starts to open slowly. Everyone is motionless, lying on the ground, wondering who it could be. A black figure is noticed at that moment. Kang seems to recognize who just arrived. Earlier, when the commotion started, Kang had taken advantage of the chaos to grab her phone at that moment and send a message asking for help. And the help had arrived. Senpai was there, using his demonic ability, Darkness. The entire ground was covered in that dark matter, which caused our group to be engulfed by it. The leader was also being affected by this ability, and apparently, it was effective. He had been completely submerged in the dark matter. The leader was surprised by this. In this dark space, it was impossible to feel anything. It was as if you didn't exist. The leader was still confused by the situation. Senpai appears behind him to subdue him, and the leader seemed to be completely restrained as his consciousness faded. Senpai had dealt with the leader and turned his attention to our protagonist, who was terrified, having one of his panic attacks. Senpai tries to calm him down, telling him to stop. Then he puts him to sleep. Senpai reaches into his pocket. From there, he pulls out 2 eyes and places them back into his face. Apparently, those were his own eyes. After that, all the dark matter began to be absorbed into his eyes. A disturbing scene. At the location where all the commotion had taken place, everyone who was there at that moment was unconscious on the ground, And finally, the yellow dust stopped being produced. Our group regains consciousness and greets the group's senpai. He is angry that they didn't inform him about Hanmaru's peculiarities. For the first time, he showed a serious expression at that moment. Kang apologizes for this, but she believes they can handle the situation by talking to the other leader. Senpai immediately rejects the idea. The scene shifts to HQ. It looks like an interrogation room. Our protagonist was there, imprisoned. He is very worried about what might happen. In another part of the building, in a meeting room, the leadership was discussing Hanmaru's future. Senpai doesn't want to give up on keeping the protagonist under his watch. The HQ leader says he is too dangerous, especially because he can produce yellow dust. Then she mentions the incident with the Jiang team, expressing concern for civilians. Senpai says they were the ones who started the incident, using violence, and he reminds the director of the terrible reputation that team has, that it was supposed to be the board's responsibility to control that group of psychopaths. The chief is extremely irritated upon hearing this, but Ildo says it's fine. That in fact, he doesn't care what kind of personality an officer has. Even if they are a bunch of psychopaths, they are still necessary to fight demons. Ildo provokes Senpai, saying that this is still better than avoiding fights by hiding in the department. Senpai says that if this is true for the psychopaths, then it should also apply to Hanmaru, and he mentioned that the protagonist is well under control thanks to his companions. Then Ildo asks if he would take responsibility for any casualties caused by Hanmaru. Senpai simply says yes and asks to leave. When our group was finally leaving, Eden is called to stay in the room. It looks like he is not at all comfortable with this request. The rest of the group continues until they exit the building. The protagonist starts worrying about Eden and feels uneasy about the situation. Senpai simply says they will have to face disciplinary actions and will have their pay cut. This was a shock for our protagonist. Senpai says the incident only went unnoticed because it was with the Gangwa team, and that he doesn't know what might happen if there are more incidents since Ildo likes to be prepared. Meanwhile, in the director's office, Eden and Ildo are discussing Hanmaru. Ildo wants to know if Eden is capable of handling Hanmaru in case he loses control. But Eden is caught off guard by this question. He finds the situation amusing. He didn't expect that to be the first thing his father would say to him after 20 years. Ildo tells him to behave because he's not there as his father, but as the director. Hanmaru could no longer be considered just a demonic ability user. And he continues, saying that a human producing yellow dust is the same as a demon. Meanwhile, outside, our senpai is still trying to stress the seriousness of the situation. The scene shifts to another location. Our protagonist is there at this moment. Inside a messy house, piles of dirty dishes stacked in the sink, and someone was there with our protagonist. Senpai is there and says he's going to live with him from now on. The protagonist is disturbed by this information, but Senpai insists that there's no other way to handle the protagonist's situation. Senpai and Hanmaru will do all activities together from now on. At the environmental department, Four Eyes seems to have something to say to our protagonist, so Hanmaru asks right away what it is, and Four Eyes threatens him, saying she'll finish him if he produces yellow dust in the office. The one with colored hair tells her not to make him angry or Hanmaru might end up creating the dust. The protagonist is quite upset to hear these things, so he gets a little lost in thought. The plant guy warns that the protagonist just sighed. Senpai becomes alert and rushes over to see if the protagonist produced yellow dust, but Hanmaru says he isn't producing any crap. In the hallway, our protagonist is quite annoyed that he can't even breathe in peace. And there he runs into Eden, who remembers his dark conversation with his father about Hanmaru. He recalls his father saying that Hanmaru might end up being his enemy. The protagonist doesn't understand why he's being stared at. He gets irritated and asks if Eden wants to bother him just like the others. However, Eden says he doesn't care about him enough to do that. But Hanmaru finds his behavior very odd now, and it irritates him a lot. But at that moment, the chubby guy arrives with Captain Kang, who welcomes the chubby guy on his first day at the department. She also says she'll be keeping an eye on the protagonist from now on, watching his eyes. But the protagonist tells her not to worry because he isn't generating yellow dust at the moment. Kang tells him not to be bothered by his teammates' attitudes. They're like this because if another incident happens, they won't be able to do anything about it. The protagonist, even though he doesn't like it, says he understands the situation. Sometime later at the office, the protagonist is apparently tired of working, having to deal with paperwork, and to avoid incidents, apparently the leader is keeping Hanmaru out of action. At that moment, someone visits the office. They were those stylish middle-aged men. Kang asks who they are, but out of nowhere, the dude with the ladybug hairstyle charges at him, and the punch gets Hanmaru squarely, sending him flying after taking the hit. Mr. Nutcase is trying to provoke him into emitting yellow dust. With this, he becomes extremely angry, but the protagonist remembers that it will be a problem if he causes an incident there. So he tries to calm himself down at that moment, but the ladybug-haired guy won't give up. At that moment, out of nowhere, Mosquito Airport lands a solid kick on his companion. Ladybug is knocked out after taking that hit right in the face. Mosquito Airport apologizes for his companion and says he's an idiot. Then he introduces the two of them as Double Standard from HQ. The protagonist becomes curious about them being from HQ. Mosquito Airport says yes, but that Ladybug is there because he's a fan. Ladybug says he really wants to meet Hanmaru, calling him King Hanmaru, who doesn't understand anything. But Ladybug says he is even more impressive than Ildo because Hanmaru emits yellow dust. He keeps praising him, saying that it's the best demonic ability there is. Hanmaru feels a bit lost with this compliment. Some time passes and our protagonist is still thinking about it. The scene shifts to a location where he is working with a chubby guy, who seems a bit uneasy about something. It's almost the end of the day. The two are doing some routine checks, but they are having trouble with that equipment. At that moment, the chubby guy says it might be his fault, that he just didn't say anything because he doesn't want to be hated like in his old team. However, our protagonist tries to reassure him, saying that in this team, people won't reprimand him for making mistakes. But our protagonist thinks about it and isn't sure if they really wouldn't do that. So he decides to just let it go for now. The chubby guy starts talking about yellow dust, and our protagonist doesn't understand why. At that moment, Hanmaru starts seeing yellow dust at his feet. Then he quickly turns around, and right behind him, a demon with a rather peculiar appearance appears. The chubby guy is worried because the yellow dust detector is broken at the moment and won't trigger any alerts, but the protagonist tries to calm him down, saying that this dust density indicates a level 1 demon. At that moment, he remembers the compliment he received, so our protagonist charges at the creature, grabbing it while trying to bite it. Hanmaru manages to land the bite. He thinks that despite being a level 1 demon, there's only one way to get rid of it quickly. Apparently, the bite was very effective, and the chubby guy is impressed that the protagonist finished it off in a single attack. But something strange happens at that moment. The monster starts to open up, and something is emerging from inside, and the protagonist tries to understand what's happening. It was as if the monster was shedding its skin, and while doing so, one of the bubbles on its chest bursts. And not only that, the monster had evolved into a level 2 demon. The protagonist becomes worried at that moment, trying to assess the situation, because the monster is getting stronger. The chubby guy comments that with this yellow dust density, it must be level 5. So he starts running and says he will contact the rest of the team immediately. But something happens at that moment. The monster charges at the chubby guy. The creature was incredibly fast, and was about to land a hit on him, but he reacts quickly and manages to use his acid ability. The creature takes a direct hit, but the protagonist is worried about it evolving again. The fatal attack transformed its body into a cocoon, which started preparing to shed its skin. Finally, an even more evolved version emerged from the cocoon. This was a demonic ability with evolutionary traits. The chubby guy is concerned because the creature is already at level 6 and could become even stronger, and the protagonist is also worried, thinking this could be a problem. Then he finally starts thinking about the bubbles on its chest, which indicate that the demon can still evolve up to level 10. The protagonist starts thinking about the chubby guy's safety, so he takes responsibility and decides to distract the creature while the chubby guy runs for help. However, the chubby guy doesn't want to leave the protagonist alone with a level 6 demon, but Hanmaru reassures him, saying that in reality he is quite strong. At that moment, our protagonist advances, thinking about eating this demon too. Managing to copy its regeneration abilities, Hanmaru prepares to attack the monster, but the creature is fast and manages to dodge, and at the same moment, the monster counterattacks. But the attack, besides being fast, was also incredibly strong. Hanmaru then thinks that to defeat the creature, he will have to evolve as well. The monster continues attacking, and it looks like Hanmaru is done for at that moment. However, for some reason, the protagonist wasn't evolving yet, and this might be due to his insane regeneration speed. The protagonist thinks that there can only be one way in this case, which is to take a brutal hit. At that moment, the monster attacks Hanmaru with full force, and the chubby guy is desperate, trying to help Hanmaru somehow. The monster is struck by the chubby guy's attack, but something doesn't seem right. Apparently, the attack had no effect on the creature, and the chubby guy doesn't understand how that's possible. The creature retaliates, punching him in the face, and continues attacking, trying to finish him off. The chubby guy was in serious trouble, but at that moment, the protagonist appears behind the creature, landing another bite on its neck, tearing off a chunk of the monster. The attack seems to have been quite effective. The protagonist doesn't waste time and rushes to help the chubby guy. Then the protagonist asks why he didn't run. He explains that, aside from this being his fault, the chubby guy wants to change himself, wanting to perform a heroic act, telling the protagonist to leave and call for help. But if the chubby guy stays, he will end up dying, because the monster will just kill him right there. So the protagonist has to deal with the situation alone. Hanmaru then prepares to face the monster, which can still evolve 3 more times. The protagonist thinks that he can't let it evolve to level 10, so his idea is to bite the creature before it completely emerges from the cocoon. At that moment, the cocoon breaks open, and inside, an evolved version of the monster was forming. The protagonist had found an opening to reach the inner part, so he wastes no time and goes in to bite the inside. But at that moment, the cocoon attacks Hanmaru. The attack was brutal, and he fell to the ground, apparently unconscious. The creature had successfully evolved. However, something was happening to Hanmaru's body. Could it be that he was finally evolving? And realizing this might be the case, our protagonist gets excited. But at that moment, the monster grabs his head. The demon then lifts him into the air and prepares a devastating attack. The protagonist, having been struck, is sent flying from the force of the impact. But apparently, he was in the process of becoming a cocoon. The demon turns its attention to the chubby guy, but Hanmaru can't do anything at the moment, as he is still being thrown by the force of the impact. But he finally stops after crashing into a tree, his body completely in cocoon form. At that moment, the protagonist begins shedding his skin. Then he emerges from his old body, and the evolution was a success. But Hanmaru had to act fast, because the chubby guy was about to be killed. The protagonist realizes he is much faster now after evolving, and thinks he might be able to reach the chubby guy in time. But when he arrives at the spot where the chubby guy was, he finds nothing. Additionally, the yellow dust had disappeared. The protagonist is completely confused when suddenly his phone starts ringing. Apparently, the demon had been moved to another district. Sensei was calling at that moment, asking if he had seen the alert about the level 7 demon. Hanmaru says yes and has things to say about it. But Senpai interrupts him, telling him not to get involved this time. Hanmaru thinks it's hard not to get involved since he's already there. But the protagonist is relieved because a team is being sent, so he just goes after the chubby guy. The protagonist starts hearing a notification sound, so he follows the sound, and apparently it was the chubby guy's alarm. The protagonist wastes no time and runs over to ask if he's okay. But there was a lot of blood there, and his condition was beyond saving. The protagonist panics at that moment and tries to do something, producing yellow dust, struggling to try to revive the chubby guy. But it's unclear if it will work. The chubby guy seemed to have already passed away. The protagonist seems to grieve, and his expression turns completely dark. He then places his companion's body on the ground and starts walking away from there. He had failed to protect a teammate. Exhaling a sinister energy, the protagonist then leaves. The scene shifts to another location, where Captain Kang had just arrived. She asks where Senpai is, and he says he's almost there. The alert states that the creature is now level 9, and they don't understand why its level keeps increasing. Because of this, Senpai asks Kang not to get involved in the fight, but something happens at that moment. Besides the noise, there was a lot of yellow dust on the mountain, and the alert now stated that the demon was level 10. Senpai is very concerned about this. The rest of the group starts to panic. Eden tells the driver to speed up the car. It seems the group was trying to reach the location. The scene shifts back to Kang. She thinks about stopping the creature from reaching the village. Suddenly, Captain Kang stops, because she had just found the demon, but in reality, what she saw was Hanmaru, who yells at her, telling Kang to leave immediately. The captain doesn't understand what's going on and asks why he's there. The protagonist simply tells her that she needs to leave right away, because he is handling the situation at the moment. But Kang doesn't want to leave and keeps asking what's happening. Then Hanmaru gives in and explains that the creature has finally evolved into its final form, and Kang is confused about demonic evolution. Meanwhile, in the background, amid the dense yellow dust, a demon could be seen. This demon had a sinister appearance. Kang now understands that Hanmaru had been fighting the creature until it reached level 10. The protagonist says it's his responsibility to kill that thing. He then prepares to finish himself off. Kang tries to stop him at that moment, but the protagonist explains that he possesses the demonic evolution ability and that this is the method for evolving. Kang notices a difference in the protagonist's personality. She tries to calm him down, saying reinforcements will arrive soon. However, Hanmaru says he doesn't need any help. But Kang is still worried about Hanmaru, so our protagonist simply ignores her at that moment. Using the stake, he finishes himself off. Kang is shocked by the scene, so she just watches our protagonist, and in the middle of that extremely dense yellow dust, Kang notices something. There were multiple cocoons, indicating that Hanmaru had finished himself off multiple times. This leaves her paralyzed for a moment, as the creature takes the opportunity to jump onto her back. The captain senses the demon's movement, but dodging this attack was already impossible. At that moment, Hanmaru stops the demon's punch. The protagonist had just evolved. It was a battle of strength, where the protagonist rips the demon's arm off using brute force. Our boy was, without a doubt, different. The monster is shocked by this. Then it grabs Hanmaru by the neck and prepares an attack at that moment, throwing our protagonist to the ground. The attack was devastating, and our protagonist took the full force of it. Hanmaru struggled to break free. This had turned into a ground fight. The scene shifts to where the chubby guy's body was. Senpai was there at the scene, wondering what happened, but at that moment, he hears a loud impact, and back at the location where Hanmaru and Kang were, she starts reflecting on his previous personality, thinking that it had changed drastically. Meanwhile, the battle between Hanmaru and the demon continues. The creature is still trying to regenerate its arm, but our protagonist isn't giving it any space. Observing the battle, Kang is very impressed by his transformation. At that moment, our protagonist prepares an attack, but the creature focuses its energy on its arm, causing it to regenerate completely. The demon then prepares a counterattack. Hanmaru is hit directly in the stomach. The force of the attack sends Hanmaru flying. He is launched far away, crashing through the forest, stopping only after slamming into a rock. Kang tries to act at that moment, but she is immediately stopped by Senpai. He warns her that she cannot fight a level 10 demon, and that doing so could cause another death. Kang asks who died. At that moment, Senpai simply doesn't respond, because he is extremely tense, demanding to know why Hanmaru is there. The scene shifts to HQ, where the chief is worried about the level 10 demon alert, and she is discussing the issue with someone. The old woman's name was Jae. The old lady was part of the HQ team. She says that if the reinforcements can't handle it, Ildo should go to the site. He comments that this is the first time a level 10 has appeared in 2 years. The chief reminds him that during that incident, the entire team died and there were civilian casualties. But Ildo tells her not to worry because Senpai is there. And besides him, there's also that other person. The scene shifts back to the battlefield, where our protagonist is recovering from the last attack he took. Senpai is there, very confused by the situation, and then he yells at Hanmaru to stop, but the protagonist just ignores him and charges at the creature. The demon prepares itself, and the two are about to collide. The impact of their punch creates a loud shockwave, but it looks like the protagonist got the worst of it. With the collision, his arm is completely destroyed, and the demon takes the opportunity to grab his neck. The situation wasn't looking good at that moment, so Senpai decides to take action, but the protagonist hadn't given up, and for some reason he prepares an attack using his severed arm. Then he shoves his arm inside the creature's mouth, and apparently he was using his rapid regeneration ability. With his arm positioned inside the creature's mouth, it begins to regenerate rapidly, causing his arm to burst out from the other side of the demon's head, and Senpai can't believe the creature's head had been pierced. The protagonist had landed a devastating blow on the demon. Then he takes the opportunity to bite the creature, and he actually succeeds. The scene was incredible. Kang thinks that now the creature won't be able to regenerate anymore because of the bite. Then the protagonist prepares to finish off the creature, and with a completely calm expression, Hanmaru gets to work. At that moment, Senpai tries to make him stop. However, the protagonist keeps hitting the demon. This makes Captain Kang step in to put an end to the situation. And finally, the demon had been completely defeated, but the protagonist's body was still throbbing with pain. Kang, very worried, rushes to Hanmaru to comfort him. The rest of the team arrives at the scene, and they want to know if Captain Kang and Senpai managed to kill the demon. But Senpai responds that it wasn't him. In fact, it was that lunatic Hanmaru who defeated the demon. And with that, Eden is in disbelief at what he just heard. Meanwhile, our protagonist seems a bit shaken after the situation. The scene shifts to a church, where the chubby guy's body was being mourned, and his family was there saying their goodbyes. Along with his group of officers, everyone there seemed deeply affected by the situation. Kang asks Senpai if he's okay, but he says no because he never gets used to this kind of thing. Then Kang asks how he will handle this incident, and Senpai says that fortunately, the creature didn't destroy the body, so at least they were able to hold a funeral for the chubby guy, and that the Gangwa mountain is no longer safe. Then she mentions that Hanmaru hasn't been seen since. Senpai says that he just left a resignation letter and disappeared. Then Kang says she'll try to find him and to lead the situation to her for now. However, Senpai says it won't work, because he has been through this kind of situation before. He tells her that at HQ, there is a level 10 monster that wiped out his entire team in the past, and Senpai was the only survivor that time. Senpai then decides to leave, telling Kang that once you witness the death of your comrades, you can never return to the same place as before. The scene shifts to where the protagonist is, lying down. A rift suddenly opens behind him. A bloodied hand emerges from that rift. Apparently, it was a human hand. The protagonist is surprised by the scene. It was Ildo who had just stepped out of the rift, saying he only came to talk to Hanmaru. Kang is surprised by what she is seeing, and Ildo explains that this was only possible because he had just killed a demon. Right after, Ildo grabs a cloth and starts wiping himself while asking the protagonist if he's in that state because of the incident. Then Hanmaru asks if he's there to reprimand him. However, Ildo says no, and that the chubby guy's death was because he was weak. The protagonist is shocked by Ildo's coldness, and he continues, saying that what concerns him the most are Hanmaru's abilities, when suddenly he mentions the name Han-suan, saying that our protagonist cannot end up like him. This catches Hanmaru by surprise, and he asks how Ildo knows his father. Ildo then explains that he and his father were the leaders of the first squad. The protagonist asks if this information is really true. Ildo continues, saying that they were the first ones sent when demons first appeared. The scene shifts to 1999, where a gun is being fired. Something seems to illuminate the night sky. Soldier Ildo, who was there, wonders what is happening. But in front of them, there was a demon, and apparently, firearms were useless at that moment. Then we see Hanmaru's father. Ildo, who was beside him, was paralyzed. Suwon, Hanmaru's father, quickly tries to snap him out of it, telling Ildo to take charge of the 6th squad immediately. At that moment, a soldier had just been sliced in half. The pin of a grenade is pulled, and an order is given to throw all the grenades. The monster is surrounded by grenades, ready to explode. As the soldiers try to take cover, a massive explosion then occurs. However, it was impossible to see what had happened due to the smoke. The soldiers present didn't know if it had worked, because there was still too much smoke in the area. Then, they move into the dust cloud to check the monster's condition. Hanmaru's father notices something, because it was still possible to see a black shadow in the middle of that yellow dust, and the creature was missing half of its body, but it still seemed alive, incredibly enough. Meanwhile, Ildo wonders what all that yellow dust was. At that moment, the monster begins to regenerate. The soldiers don't waste any time and start attacking before the creature fully regenerates. But all that effort was in vain, and the situation was truly desperate. In the first recorded battle against a demon, Ildo's entire team was wiped out, leaving only him and Hanmaru's father. Ildo, worried about his comrade, asks if he is okay, but Hanmaru's father is still in shock from what happened, and more yellow dust begins to emerge in the area, indicating that it wasn't over yet. Hanmaru's father then rushes to take action. Ildo tries to call him back, ordering Suwon to stop immediately. Ildo wants to understand what's happening to him, but he is shocked by something. Inside the yellow dust, a creature with multiple eyes could be seen. Ildo tells Hanmaru's father not to stay near it. Suwon then turns around for a few moments and says that if they intend to survive, he must accept this thing, and that would be the only way. Ildo doesn't understand what he means at that moment. A rift then suddenly appears in front of Ildo, and it starts opening wider and wider. Inside the rift, 2 eyes could be seen. A hand then emerges from within, striking Ildo directly in the stomach. And this is the story from that day that Ildo was telling Hanmaru. That's how Ildo obtained his ability, just like the other special public servants. Hanmaru then questions him about his father. Ildo says that he tried to summon him to help lead the organization against the demons, but it didn't work. After receiving the demon's power, it seems that half of his mind was devastated, fixating only on a single purpose, and that purpose was to reach the abyss. Then Hanmaru remembers that time when his father murmured strange words about reaching the abyss. Ildo continues, saying that his father chose to become a demon in order to defeat them all. Our protagonist doesn't understand what he means by becoming a demon, and Ildo explains that the blood of demons flows in the veins of all demon ability users. With that, it would be possible to fully become a demon by crossing the abyss. The two continue talking late into the night. The protagonist tries to process all the information he received, wondering if his father really went to the abyss to become a demon, and Ildo says that giving up isn't much different from becoming a demon. With this, he tries to weigh on the protagonist's conscience, asking if he is really going to abandon all of humanity. The next day, at the environmental department, Senpai is there, observing something. It was Hanmaru's desk, still empty. Then Senpai says he will proceed with Hanmaru's resignation request. Captain Kang arrives at that moment, saying that she is going to Hanmaru's house to talk to him. But suddenly, the protagonist was there. The entire office is surprised. Hanmaru is now determined to continue his work in the special services to uncover the whole truth, because he refuses to believe that his father became a demon, as Ildo said. The scene then shifts to another location. It was Ildo standing in front of a creature at HQ, saying that the preparations are almost complete, and that soon he will be able to see the abyss. At the environmental department, there was a heavy air of boredom in the office. Four Eyes announces that it's lunchtime. Hanmaru isn't hungry and tells them they can go. She complains that it's just the 4 of them again. Hanmaru is apparently very discouraged since that incident. But it wasn't just him. The whole team was feeling down and depressed. Later that day, at Hanmaru's residence, Senpai was still living in that house, along with our protagonist. Outside, Hanmaru was taking out the trash when he is surprised by Captain Kang. She says she's living nearby for convenience, and it seems that the rest of the team lives in the same building. Apparently, Hanmaru didn't know this until now. Kang then notices what Hanmaru is doing and offers to help him. Kang thinks he is still blaming himself for the accident, so she tries to downplay things. However, Hanmaru says it wasn't his fault and asks her not to try to comfort him. But Captain Kang says she isn't trying to comfort him and that he needs to move on, that all team members have lost someone important. Then the protagonist takes a moment to think about that. The next day, with the alarm blaring, Senpai then dispatches the team. Senpai seems to have stomach problems, and the protagonist prepares to leave. Eden, who hadn't been dispatched, asked to go instead of Hanmaru, worried that the protagonist might mess something up again. Hearing this deeply affects Hanmaru, as he still blames himself for the last incident. Eden is very irritated by his depressive attitude, and in the end, he was sent instead of Hanmaru. Four Eyes tells him to be careful with what he says around Hanmaru, but he replies that he shouldn't go easy on Hanmaru. At that moment, something hits Eden right in the forehead, and he collapses on the ground like a plank. Eden doesn't understand what just happened. He gets up, feeling a bit dazed. At that moment, something catches Eden's attention. The one with colored hair was on the ground, and the level 6 creature was right next to her. Eden quickly uses his ability, eliminating the creature instantly, but he hopes he wasn't too late. Apparently, everything is fine. His companions are safe. They just check if the creature is really dead, but the one with colored hair notices something strange at that moment. There was a very fat and grumpy cat standing there, staring at them. The cat's name was Jang. Four Eyes asks how she knows the cat's name. Then she explains that the cat looks exactly like hers, but it doesn't make sense for it to be there. So she simply decides to take the cat to the department, though she finds it odd that it's so fat. However, Eden seems against this, but Four Eyes insists that there's no problem in taking the cat. At the department, she introduces the cat to everyone, which shocks two of them for some reason. Officer Cage, in a panic, tells the one with colored hair to drop the cat, and here, we see that the cat is actually a demon. The moment it is noticed, it shoots spikes at the group. It looks like everyone was hit right in the forehead. The demon, which looks like a baby, then falls to the ground and runs out of the office. The one with colored hair tries to chase after it, thinking that the demon is still her cat, Jang. But the demon, despite its size, is incredibly fast. The one with colored hair doesn't give up, but as she turns the hallway corner, she gets startled by something. There was a door with the face of that baby demon. Somewhere else in the department, Senpei was also on the ground. Some time passes after the baby demon incident. Senpei is trying to understand the situation, why the one with colored hair brought a demon into the department. But she explains that the demon looked exactly like her cat. However, Four Eyes interrupts her, saying they need to focus on the current problem. At the door with the demonic face, the group crosses through. On the other side, there was what seemed to be a forest full of yellow dust. Captain Kang, at that moment, says she has spotted the demon. Deep inside the yellow fog, something black could be seen. It was the shadow of a demon. The aberration had the form of a spider, and beneath it were what appeared to be civilians. It was a boy and a woman, both looking injured. Four Eyes is worried about the situation, and we see that the boy seemed to be part of her family, an illusion of two lost loved ones. Thinking it was real, she rushes forward to try and save the supposed victims, but Officer Kang holds her back at that moment. However, she insists that she must go, saying the boy was her son when she first saw a demon, but the captain keeps telling her that it's just an illusion. Then she starts remembering something. They were hit in the head, and that must be the cause of the illusions. The protagonist then asks if that monstrous spider is also an illusion, and Eden responds that it could be trying to imitate a demon they've seen before. Maru wonders if this is really possible, recalling how demons function in theory. Then the protagonist questions whether the demons that gave him his abilities could be duplicated there. The captain says yes, it's possible. Both the level 10 demon and Hanmaru's gluttony demon could appear. If that's the case, she wonders what they could do to stop it. The protagonist thinks that if they fail to kill the duplicator demon, it might end up duplicating the gluttony demon. And if that happens, everyone there could die. Hanmaru then gets lost in his worries, but Senpei tries to calm him down, saying that none of them will die and that they always protect each other. Captain Kang is the first to charge at the creature, while Eden immediately activates his ability. The demon is then hit hard, and it looks like Kang managed to land a clean cut. She then makes a hero's landing, and fortunately, the two of them manage to deal with the spider-shaped demon. But the group starts noticing something strange. Seeing another door, they wonder where the duplicator is. Kang first tries to comfort her teammate. Having seen her son's dead body must have been shocking, so she might need some time. The protagonist thinks that a demon capable of doing something like this is pure evil. Eden tells them to hurry up, open the other door, and finish this once and for all. The group then arrives at another location. There were several spores indicating that these were Plant Guy's memories, and in fact they were. Kim starts remembering his wife, and that fateful day when he lost her. Suddenly, Yoshioki spots the demon on the ceiling. It was really there. Its appearance was definitely spore-related. It had the same abilities as Tree Guy. The protagonist complains that one of the spores got into his mouth, causing him to choke. The spores were invading his throat, and it wasn't just the protagonist. Everyone was in the same situation. The protagonist remained conscious only because of his abnormal regeneration. Given that, he decides to deal with the situation on his own. The protagonist then charges at the creature, sinking his teeth into its shoulder, tearing the creature's skin apart, causing both of them to fall from the ceiling. Apparently, the spore creature had been defeated, because the yellow dust was thinning out. However, the protagonist complains about not being able to absorb the demon's ability, since it was a duplicate. With the creature dead, the rest of the group starts coming back to their senses. Yoseok says she thought this time she was really going to die. Meanwhile, Captain Kang, still recovering, calls out for Hanmaru, because beside them, something was happening. The plant guy was still shaken by the illusion of his deceased wife. It was an extremely sad scene for the group to witness. The protagonist then realizes that everyone in the group has lost someone important in their lives, and that he isn't the only one with problems. Hanmaru then concludes he can't keep being depressed like this. Eden, as cold as ever, tells him to hurry up. Ignoring his teammates' moment of grief, he simply tells them to get out of the way. Eden was about to open the door, when suddenly, the protagonist tries to stop him, saying it might be dangerous. However, Eden says that they need to kill the next creature no matter what. The door is then opened, and Hanmaru tries to see who is on the other side. At that moment, Eden's expression turns serious, and the protagonist asks if the memory is his, judging by his annoyed face. Then we see the creature. The demon had a rather peculiar appearance, and in the memories of the past, it shows Eden begging for that demon's ability. He wanted a power stronger than his father's. The protagonist is in disbelief at what he sees. However, Eden explains that this was the only way to fight his father. With the memories still playing, the creature breaks one of its fingers. At that moment, Eden's leg is broken. Immediately after, the demon charges at him. However, present-day Eden wants to stop this situation before the others see what happened, so he uses his demonic ability, and the demon is immediately affected. Eden seems very eager to kill that thing. The demon then positions multiple hands around its arm. It prepares to use multiple abilities, breaking several of its fingers. The attack hits Eden directly, causing him to fall to the ground, unconscious. Hanmaru quickly tries to help him, while Captain Kang charges at the monster. Four Eyes and Sensei were standing by, ready to act. Meanwhile, the demon was preparing to use its abilities again. The protagonist started getting very worried about the situation, but the creature prepared to break multiple fingers. This caused the entire team to be affected, and this was what the temple demon was capable of. The creature was too powerful. The protagonist was able to resist a little longer because of his regeneration, but he recognized that the temple demon was far too strong. Eden was still on the ground, and the protagonist wondered why he hadn't gotten up yet. Because the demon was strong, but Eden had the same demonic ability. Hearing these words from our protagonist angers him. Then he starts remembering that all he ever wanted was to get a high-tier ability to surpass his father, but he feels pathetic for being surpassed by our protagonist. However, he thinks that if he can't even stand up, there's no point in being a demon ability user. At that moment, the demon prepares to use its abilities again. Hanmaru tells everyone to get ready. The creature starts breaking all of its fingers, causing our protagonist to take a direct hit. The attack was devastating, causing Hanmaru to lose movement in his legs, making him fall to the ground hard as the demon passed by his side. But in front of him was Senpai, so he shouts for him to do something about it. However, Senpai explains that he lost movement in his arms, so he can't use his ability. And the protagonist feels even more hopeless knowing that even Senpai is useless in this moment. So he insists that Eden do something, since he is also a temple demon ability user. At that moment, the monster was already standing in front of the weaker members of the group. The demon then prepares to use its ability once again. Eden tells the protagonist to shut up, saying he knows what he has to do. Then the creature's arm is torn off with the use of his ability. This creates an opening for Captain Kang. She seizes the opportunity and charges at the creature, striking it with her blood blade. However, the cut was too shallow. Because she was weak from broken bones, the creature wastes no time and sends her flying. But that wasn't all. Something strange was happening. Captain Kang was still suspended in the air. Hanmaru doesn't understand why this is happening to her, but Eden knows exactly what's going on. The focus shifts to the severed limb of the demon. The arm that was on the ground starts growing multiple hands. They begin stretching out in a specific direction, and they were the ones suspending Captain Kang in the air. But not only that, the hands started crushing Captain Kang's entire body. She screams in pain at that moment. The protagonist is shocked by the sight and rushes to try and do something. Eden, at that moment, tells him to stop, but it was too late, and the monster managed to capture him as well. Now Hanmaru is also suspended in the air, complaining that he was unable to see what grabbed him. However, Eden knows that those are invisible hands, so he starts thinking of a countermeasure. At that moment, Eden bites his own arm. His intention is to mimic the demon's movement. Then his blood begins to move toward the creature. Eden's blood takes the form of hands and starts immobilizing the monster. Eden then announces that this is the moment to strike, and at that moment, something hits the creature directly. It was Four Eyes Spider. With a nervous expression, she says that they won. However, the victory came at a high cost. The effort required to defeat that demon was immense. With that battle, Eden learned a new ability. At that moment, someone calls his attention. It was the protagonist asking if he saw that, referring to the ability and telling him to use it on the next door. Eden tells him to mind his own business and calls him a scavenger. Then he calls him trash, making the protagonist furious. They arrive at the next door. The group prepares to go through it, but Hanmaru is extremely nervous. The one with colored hair is scared by the sounds behind the door. Captain Kang thinks that it might be Hanmaru's gluttony demon. The protagonist wonders if it's finally his turn. He then approaches the door, preparing to open it. There's a lot of tension in the air, and they could already hear a little boy calling for his father. These were really Hanmaru's memories from the time he came face to face with the gluttony demon. The protagonist's group is shocked upon seeing the demon. The one with colored hair asks if that's really the gluttony demon. Eden and Captain Kang are in disbelief upon seeing that the creature has eyes. In the memories, his father is dragging Hanmaru by force, saying that obtaining the gluttony ability is the only way to protect loved ones. Meanwhile, the protagonist reflects on those words, because they weren't the same words Ildo told him. The protagonist had heard that his father abandoned humanity, but that wasn't true. The scene then cuts to HQ, where Ildo is complaining about the small number. The old woman says no, that the number of demon ability users has grown exponentially. However, Ildo says that numbers aren't what matters, but rather the quality. Continuing, he says that the number of level 7 or higher abilities is too low. The old woman then questions if he wants to force the creation of new demon ability users, and Ildo says yes, if necessary. But the old woman didn't like what she just heard. She confronts him about his intentions to cause casualties on purpose to create new demon ability users. She keeps reprimanding him while he remains silent. At that moment, the two are interrupted. It was the secretary saying that the requested material delivery was delayed and that they lost contact with the gangway team. The old woman gets angry, yelling at the secretary to do something about it. The scene shifts to where the duplicated gluttony demon was. The protagonist was thinking that he should have just stayed home. The one with colored hair calls attention to something. The gluttony demon was disintegrating. In the end, the duplicated monster simply disappeared. Four Eyes wonders why they weren't attacked by the duplicate gluttony, and Senpei responds that it wasn't just any demon. With that, the group feels relieved that they didn't have to fight that demon. Now it was Captain Kang's turn. They had to move on to the next door, but Kang asks everyone to stay where they are, saying that she will go alone. The protagonist gets worried at that moment. However, Kang says she needs to do this alone to prepare for the future. Then she heads toward the door, saying she'll be back soon. The door then closes, and the protagonist starts thinking, since even Eden couldn't face his own demon. Hanmaru gets the brilliant idea to peek through the door's opening. He struggles to try and see something. There was a lot of loud clashing, and there was Kang fighting the Iron Demon. But something else catches the protagonist's attention. In Kang's memory, there was a second demon, one that, just like Gluttony, also had eyes. Eden also gets curious and tries to see what's happening. Then he too is stunned by the scene. Just like the Gluttony demon, the creature was falling apart. Meanwhile, the captain was under heavy pressure. The monster was preparing to attack. The protagonist decides to try and do something, but Captain Kang insists that he not intervene. However, the protagonist says that's not the case and tells her to pay attention. The creature had armor, and Captain Kang could do the same. She then thinks about it for a moment, and the door closes at that moment. The protagonist questions why Eden closed the door, and he responds that this is enough. Meanwhile, all they could hear were sounds from the other side of the door. Without being able to see anything, the group grows anxious. Finally, the door begins to open. From inside, a bladed claw with a demonic appearance emerges. This makes Hanmaru very concerned, but it was Captain Kang after all, announcing her victory. Exhausted, she could barely stand, and Hanmaru rushes to help her before she collapses. Meanwhile, Eden was impressed by the sight, because he needed teamwork to defeat his monster, but Kang did everything alone. Now 2 team members remained, Yoshioki and Senpei. However, the red door still hadn't appeared. Eden mentions that the demon they encountered on the mountain was similar to Yoshioki's demon, and the creature had abilities similar to hers. Then the one with colored hair starts talking about her cat. She found the demon while searching for her cat. But this doesn't explain why the door didn't appear for Senpei either. She questions whether it's possible the demon forgot about him. This upsets the team a little, since he hasn't done anything so far. But the one with colored hair is grateful that they didn't have to face a level 10 demon. The relaxed Senpei says he's just happy everyone is safe, that this is the best possible ending since everyone is fine. With that, Senpei considers treating everyone better from now on, recognizing their efforts. At that moment, the yellow dust starts to disperse, and Senpei asks if, by any chance, Kang also killed the duplicate inside. Senpei tells them to leave for now, take the captain to the hospital, and then throw a celebration party. But at that moment, someone charges at him. It was the protagonist, who lands a direct hit on his face. The group is confused, but Hanmaru keeps attacking, calling him a demon. Four Eyes tries to stop him, asking what he's doing, but the protagonist explains that this isn't their leader because Senpei had a stomachache from a festival he attended yesterday, and it made no sense for him to want to go to a party again. The Senpei on the ground asks what he means by his stomach. The group buys into Hanmaru's idea and starts beating up the leader right there, who begs them to stop. Then Senpei finally stands up, and with an indifferent expression runs away from there. The group chases after him until they are outside. Suddenly, Senpei appears driving a car and runs over his copy. The thing is hit by the car. Senpei is completely confused and asks what that thing is. The creature then returns to its baby demon form. At the Yellow Dust Emergency Department, Senpai wants to confirm whether he really brought a demon inside while he was in the hospital with a stomachache. Because if HQ finds out this happened, their salaries will be cut in half. So everyone agrees that the incident must be kept an absolute secret. The workday comes to an end, and Kang is relieved that she can finally go home. But someone calls out to her at that moment. It was Eden, saying he needed to talk to her about something. He saw that demon from before, the one from Captain Kang's memories. Startled, she asks where. Then Eden responds that the demon might be Director Ildo, her father.
Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.